Over the past 600 days, I've documented every step of me building something that I've never really seen done before. Something that shouldn't work on paper, but somehow it does work. A saltwater paludarium, something that started out as an idea and turned into a full-blown ecosystem. A place where saltwater marine life exists below and terrestrial plants grow above, all connected in one living, evolving system. There's no real blueprint for something like this, so in this video you're going to see the entire journey from day one to where the system is today. Now this is going to be a very long video. It's basically all the previous videos I posted on this channel combined in one big episode. This is 600 days of Saltwater Paludarium progress.
I can't believe it. After months of preparation, I transformed my bedroom into a tropical oasis. And I must say, I am proud of what we built. This is my new 100-gallon saltwater paludarium. It has been a dream of mine for years to combine plants with my saltwater projects. But if you know anything about plants, they do not like salt. This posed a huge challenge for this upcoming build, and it is safe to say, the construction of this ecosystem turned out to be very difficult. Constructing this 8-foot-long aquarium has been an adventure full of trial and error, but the beauty of it all made it all worth it in the end. This new little world of ours will serve us a lot of opportunities to explore the beauty of underwater life. And I will explain how we built this unique mist-breathing saltwater ecosystem and how it transformed my bedroom into a tropical oasis. I can't wait to share what I have in mind for this new project in the coming months. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Denny's Aquariums YouTube channel. Now before getting started, I knew that creating a saltwater paludarium was no easy task. There was no tutorial online on how to build something like this. But I knew that with the knowledge I had gained about aquariums over the past 10 years, I could turn my vision into life. So let's take it back to day one and let me show you how we built this. If you've been a regular viewer of the channel, you'd know that I had a 3-tank setup for a few years. These aquariums were a lot smaller than the one I am currently building. After breaking down my old aquariums and carefully bringing the live animals to friends of mine, it was time to start working on this new aquarium right away, because a few days later, my friend from Reef Aquarium Hobby and Aqualife were coming over to deliver this new 100-gallon aquarium. This new aquarium was going to be super heavy, so we put these wooden beams on the floor to help distribute the weight a lot better. We then began setting up the new cabinets. This was a pretty easy process despite these cabinets coming from IKEA. The instruction manuals were pretty easy to understand. Out of all the options that were presented to me, I went for kitchen cabinets, as these are pretty sturdy and you can be sure that they don't get damaged by a little bit of water. Once set up, I put some foam mats where the aquarium was going to be, and we drilled 2 holes close to the wall for the cables to go through. This turned out to be our first mistake, but we'll talk about that later. I decided to go for LEDs from the brand Ilumagic, as I've seen some incredible setups thrive with these lights. They advised me to go for 4 saltwater lights and 1 freshwater light. We are using the freshwater light for the plants that we want to incorporate with this setup, because they prefer daylight over blue light. To make sure that the fixtures were all lined up perfectly, we pulled out a laser which would guide us in the right direction. The first step was completed and we were ready for the biggest challenge of this whole setup, carrying the 8-foot-long glass aquarium up 2 flights of narrow stairs into my bedroom in the attic. Well, 5 people, a sawn-off railing, a lot of swear words, and an hour later, the tank made it into my bedroom. Luckily though, I plan on keeping this aquarium for many years, so if you want to follow along on this build, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video and subscribe to the channel. Throughout this project, I have had a ton of help from family and friends. It's been a fun project to work on. Now, I didn't want to rush setting it up like I did with my previous setup. The average hobbyist sets up an aquarium in a day or night, just like I did with my last few setups. And then after you're done setting it up, you regret not working on it for a bit longer. So instead of doing just that, I built this aquarium over the course of a few weeks, working on some small things every night. This was a lot of fun and it allowed me to really work out the details of this setup because it was quite complicated. I didn't want a setup with a sump, which for those of you that don't know, a sump is a smaller aquarium underneath your main tank which houses your pumps and filtration. Instead of using a sump, I had the idea of hiding my equipment behind the reef. This aquarium will rely on natural filtration through beneficial bacteria and live filter feeders inside the aquarium. And we will not be using any mechanical filtration except for a small surface skimmer behind the rocks to skim off the oily looking substance that forms on the surface of aquarium water. This is called biofilm, which basically is a layer of bacteria which would normally fall down into your sump through your tank's overflow. This is a massive aquarium and setting it up has been very expensive. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. I started off by taping out my idea inside the aquarium. It allowed me to work out the flow plan, making sure there is flow all throughout the tank. This is really important in a saltwater aquarium for numerous reasons. Flow encourages gas exchange at the water surface, allowing oxygen to dissolve into the water and allow carbon dioxide to escape. Flow carries away detritus, uneaten food and waste products from fish and corals. Without adequate water movement, these substances could accumulate in certain areas, leading to poor water quality, algae growth, or even toxic buildups like ammonia or nitrates, which can harm or kill the inhabitants. And there are so many more reasons as to why flow is so important in a saltwater aquarium. And now for the aquascape itself. Rather than placing big, view-obstructing power heads to generate flow on the glass, I decided to use some return pumps, all located in a central compartment behind the reef. With silicone tubes, we were able to bring the flow to the desired areas on the reef and we could hide the outflow in between the rocks. I also wanted to create a little tide pool in the aquarium. If you've been to the beach before, you know that tide pools are small, shallow areas of water that form with the tides. Inside these little pools you can find a lot of small critters like fish, shrimp, crabs, starfish and even some small corals. I figured this could be something very interesting for this aquarium. Rather than using a ton of sand and rocks to get the elevation we need for this, I built a structure using Acrate. With pond liner I sealed it off so the sand doesn't fall through. I did leave the back of the structure open as well as some small gaps on the sides to allow for proper flow exchange. Now a good friend of mine was nice enough to help out with this scape as he has a lot of experience with freshwater aquascapes and was excited to work on his first saltwater aquarium. We had to make sure that the pumps were easily accessible in case we ever need to service them. So we placed one pump in the back of the aquarium which would suck water in from underneath the tide pool and blow it back out on the right side of the tank. We also glued the magnets of one of my old power heads to the side of the tide pool. This power head will be hidden in a small cave so you don't see it. Rather than using a few big rocks and putting them on a big pile like a lot of reefers do, the aquascaping mind of my friend figured it would be a cool idea to make a nice cape with a lot of smaller rocks. With glue and an accelerator, this was a pretty easy but very time-consuming task. We filled up big gaps with filter floss so the fish can't get behind the rocks because we want to see them. I am not too worried this will lead to problems down the road. A lot of detritus will get caught in this floss, but hopefully the beneficial bacteria will help break it all down. After a few hours we only managed to do a small part of the reef. After my friend left, I started building the cover to hide the equipment. However, my shaky hands didn't think this was a good idea. So instead I decided to prepare more rocks by breaking them down using a hammer and a drill. This was a great workout, it was not easy at all. We glued leftover Acrate to the glass to protect it from the heavy rocks. We don't want this glass to crack. We were able to glue down the base of the back wall and build out the tide pool. We installed another return pump in the back chamber, a smaller version for the tide pool. We were able to make quite a bit of progress and I was really happy seeing it all take shape. I decided to get some inspiration at the Royal Dutch Burger Zoo as they have an awesome mangrove theme. And oh boy, I really want a manatee in my tank now. Just kidding. However, I did see some awesome mangrove trees and I hope mine will grow as big as these ones, so I have an excuse for an even bigger tank. I really like the look of this river's edge with wood and fern plants. I want to build something like this for my setup. Alrighty, it was time to head home and continue with my build. There is still a lot of work to do. We decided to build an arch so we can place a lot of coral on top of it and fish can swim underneath it. As you saw earlier, we installed a power head on the side of the tide pool so the flow can go straight underneath this arch. We were not even close to being done, but we wanted to put the dots on the eye with what we've built so far. Right now it still looked like a man-made structure with a ton of small rock fragments glued together. We wanted to make it look like a solid piece, so with some aquarium silicone and rubble from the rocks we destroyed earlier, we could fill in the cracks and make it look like one big rock. I had to build a second chamber to house a return pump and a small heater to distribute flow and heat a lot better. It's a big challenge to get it right for a tank this long. I decided to put this chamber in the left back corner of the aquarium so we could build the river part we saw at the zoo on top of it. We also built a mountain in the middle of the aquarium connecting all the different themes of the reef to it. I put some of my mangroves and plants in the aquarium to get an idea of the look of it. It was time to prepare the wood for the aquarium. We had to soak it in some hot water for a few hours and repeat this process a few times to get as many tannins out as possible. You can use wood in your reef tank, but it comes with some disadvantages and risks. It's very uncommon to use wood in a saltwater environment. It will break down over time and lower your pH levels, which could lead to problems. But in my case, I only wanted to submerge a few small pieces, so on a tank this big, I'm not too worried this will lead to big problems. Now unfortunately we have to remove some of these plants later in this video to make sure that they don't get close to the salt water. But for now we just place them where I want them to be eventually. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to fill up the aquarium with sand and water. Each bag of sand comes with a smaller pack of bacteria to help bring it all back in balance and clear up the water. In the areas I plan on planting mangrove trees, I put some miracle mud. It doesn't really look like mud if you ask me, it looks like gravel, but either way, this stuff is supposed to contain all the minerals the plants may need in order to thrive. It will also be a great substrate for the plants to grow their roots in. I had to add 120 pounds of live sand. That's a lot. But now it was time to add water to the aquarium and I had to carry it all up the stairs. It was an intense workout to say the least. Once I had about 4 inches of water in the tank, I decided to plant the mangrove trees. Mangroves are pretty difficult. First, I had to acclimate them to salt water, as they are usually grown in brackish water or even fresh water. This process took about a month as I had to slowly adjust the salinity levels in the water. You also have to be very careful with the roots because damaged roots will likely be a death sentence to these plants. Once they are damaged, they won't be able to maintain pressure to keep the salt out, so eventually they will just die, so we have to be very careful with this. The mangroves were planted and I decided to test out the return pumps, making sure they all worked as they were supposed to. This was pretty nerve-wracking because if it didn't work out, it would be a disaster. Luckily though, it all worked perfectly, so it was time to top off the aquarium with the rest of the water. As you can see here, I had to take down the plants from the river's edge because they weren't safe there yet. I cured some live rock from Indonesia in a separate aquarium a few weeks before, which we could now add to the aquarium as well. The tank was super cloudy and some foam formed on top of the water. This foam likely consists of dead bacteria that came out of the sand and rocks. I added a small surface skimmer to help remove this foam, even though it's not even harmful. While the cloudiness was settling, I decided to build a separate compartment using acrate and pond liner for the plants on the river's edge. That way we can water it with fresh tap water and the plants will be completely separated from the salt water. I added some nitrifying bacteria from our channel sponsor Fritz Aquatics to help break down toxic ammonia and nitrites. After that, it was time to wait. I installed a mist maker to mist the plants a few times a day to keep them nice and moist. Now, I do have very good ventilation in my room, so I hope that the humidity levels will hopefully be acceptable. If not, I'll have to install a small dehumidifier in the room. To go back to the 2 holes we drilled earlier behind the aquarium, we should have drilled a lot more, because there is not a lot of space left for the dosing pumps and the auto top-off we have to install later. After a week or so, I tested my water for ammonia and nitrite, as high levels of these can be deadly to livestock. Unfortunately, there was still a bit of nitrite present in the water, so we had to wait a bit longer before we could add any fish or coral. The tank was super clear and I was so happy with the look of it so far. 2 weeks in, the plants were still alive and doing well. And let me tell you, that's the longest I've ever kept plants in my room alive. I tested the water again and it seemed like a good moment to introduce the first animals to the aquarium. Some algae started to form on the sand and rocks, which was a great sign. So first I decided to add a mix of snails. 10 turbo snails to keep the rocks clean, 5 Babylona snails that will live in the sand bed, keeping it loose and clean. And I also added 10 very small snails to go in between the small cracks and keep those clean as well. No one wants a nasty crack, right? And that's not all, because my old pair of clownfish that I kept in my other aquarium were so excited to go explore this massive tank as well. They will have so much more room to swim here. I plan on buying a nice anemone for them very soon. When you first set up your saltwater aquarium, it's like bringing a piece of the ocean into your home. But how do you create a healthy, thriving environment for your fish from the very beginning? Meet the unsung heroes of a saltwater aquarium, live copepods. These tiny crustaceans may be small, but they play a huge role in your aquarium. Imagine you're a fish in a strange new world. Live copepods are the perfect natural food source. They're packed with nutrients and ideal for fish that are shy or finicky eaters, like mandarins and even clownfish. For fish like the mandarin dragonet, which I plan to add later, finding food can be a challenge, especially in a new environment. But with copepods, it's like having a buffet of tiny delicious snacks right at their fins. And that's not all. Copepods aren't just food, they are also nature's cleanup crew. They help break down waste, control algae, and keep your aquarium water pristine and clear. It's like having a tiny team of janitors working around the clock to keep your aquarium nice and clean. Without even realizing it, these little guys are balancing your aquarium's ecosystem, creating a healthier environment for your fish and coral. So, when you start your saltwater journey, don't forget the live copepods. They're the unsung heroes helping your underwater world thrive right from the start. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited about this new project. It's been in the works for such a long time and I am so excited to finally be able to show it to you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a little over 3 weeks since we filled up my new aquarium with water. The 100-gallon Saltwater Paludarium is ready for more life. The plants are settling in and the pair of fish we added last week are exploring their new home. The group of snails is working around the clock to keep the aquarium nice and clean. Things are looking good as the reef is slowly coming to life, but we will also discover life in the form of pests. We have to deal with them quickly before they become a bigger problem. Today it is time to introduce the first batch of life to the aquarium. It took me, a friend and some family members a few weeks to get it to look like this. It was a process of trial and error and we spent many nights working on it. Last week I asked you for suggestions of what kind of fish, coral and invertebrates we should add to this enormous system. We received so many comments, from small nanofish to pufferfish and even sharks. But unfortunately not all of them were a good option. There were also lots of questions regarding the system, about the measurements of the aquarium, the amount of flow and how much it costs to set up. So before we get started, let's answer some of those questions really quick. This is an aquarium made of ultra clear glass. It measures 250 centimeters in length by 55 centimeters in depth
and 30 centimeters in height. For the American viewers, that's 8 feet 2 inches by 1 foot 9.5 inches by 1 foot. During filming, flow is turned down to a minimum because rippling water causes the video footage to become pixelated and very unpleasant to look at. Normally, when I'm not filming or taking pictures, there's around 100 times the amount of water that's in the tank flowing through the system. And then about the cost, well, that's a sensitive topic. I didn't realize it cost this much already, and it's not even stocked with a lot of coral, fish or invertebrates yet. This will likely be the most expensive part of the system. However, I calculated how much this setup would cost so far, including the cabinets, tank, equipment, rocks, water, and everything you see here. And so far, if you want to replicate this system, it would cost you about 12,000 euros or a little over 13,000 USD. Now, this amount can differ based on your location. In some countries, certain supplies are cheaper or more expensive. So knowing that, I would really appreciate it if you watch this video till the end and give this video a thumbs up. Also make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because the more of you that are here, the more exciting things we can do with this aquarium. Now let's get back to the topic of this video, adding more life to the Saltwater Paludarium. One idea that a lot of people agreed on is that a large group of fish would look really cool in a tank this long. I explored the options and decided to order a group of Algae cardinal fish. These fish are very common in the saltwater hobby and are relatively easy to keep and breed. The interesting part about the breeding process is that these fish are mouth brooders. They carry the babies inside their mouths. I also thought that small nanofish would be an expensive but very fun option for this aquarium. Iviota and Trimma species are a species of very small nanogoby fish that usually don't get a lot bigger than 2.5 centimeters or 1 inch. I was able to order 2 types of these fish. I went for 2 smaller groups of 5 fish. I think this is a good amount to start out with. There are also a few other species that I think are a great fit for this setup, but I will review those later in this video. First, let's acclimate them. Imagine being dropped into a new world. Temperature is different, water feels weird, and everything smells off. That's what happens to your fish and corals if you toss them straight into the new aquarium. It's a shock to their system. That's why acclimation is super important, because if you rush, you might accidentally cause an ammonia spike that could harm your fish. This is often the case with fish that are shipped or spent hours inside a bag. However, if you just pick them up from the local fish store, then this wouldn't really be a concern. Here's the deal. When fish are shipped, they excrete waste. This releases ammonia into the water. In a sealed bag, that ammonia starts to build up because there's no filtration. It can get toxic really quick. So why don't the fish get hurt during the trip? Well, here's the cool part. As they breathe, they also release carbon dioxide, which lowers the pH of the water inside the bag. At lower pH levels, ammonia, which is super toxic, gets converted into ammonium, which is way less harmful. So during transit, the fish are mostly safe. But here's where things get tricky. The moment you open that bag and introduce fresh air, the pH starts to rise again, and bam! What was once safe ammonium flips back into toxic ammonia. If you're not careful, this ammonia spike can stress your fish, or worse, cause fatal ammonia poisoning. In addition to this group of Algae cardinal fish and gobies, I also ordered a few other interesting animals. I ordered 3 sand-sifting starfish that will help keep the sand clean. But that's not all. These are called sea cucumbers. They come in a lot of different varieties and colors, but these in particular are great at keeping the sand bed clean. And yeah, I agree, they look pretty weird, but they're pretty awesome as well. Last but definitely not least in the shipment is a very cool shrimp that caught my eye on the website. I had never seen it before. I did some research on it online and it turns out it eats brittle starfish. I found a lot of these tiny starfish inside the live rock I ordered from Indonesia. I think this next animal is a great addition to the new reef. This is a kind of harlequin shrimp called a spiny tiger shrimp. It is pretty uncommon here on the European market. This shrimp doesn't get much bigger than 2 centimeters or less than an inch, so we will likely never see it again, but thankfully we were able to get a glimpse of it today when we added it to the aquarium. It will have plenty of space to hide and prey on brittle starfish. And hopefully we'll just see it again someday. Now, in addition to all these live creatures, I also picked up some very cool species of macroalgae. The person that bought some of my old corals when I took down my previous aquariums happened to be a fan of macroalgae. I will find an appropriate place for them on the reef later, but for now I will just place them on this live rock. Now, of course, the new fish are still a little bit shy, especially the Banggai cardinal fish. The gobies already seem to enjoy their new home. They are jumping all over the rocks. I think this is a very cool addition to a tank this big. When sitting down a few feet from the tank, you will see them dart around the tank all over the place. It will be very interesting. The Banggais will hopefully start schooling together a little bit more in the coming days. I have 10 of them now, but might add a few more later on. Now, before we take a look at the pests I discovered in the tank, I'd like to know what you think about this setup so far. It's slowly coming to life and I would like to know your thoughts and suggestions in terms of stocking ideas for fish, corals and inverts. There are so many options. So, it is time for some pest control. For this, we'll have to get a syringe and needle out. This is going to be a very bad day for these pests. Live rock. As with all good things, it comes with its own story. Both blessings and a few, let's say, mysterious surprises. Let me take you on a journey. Inside this rock, beneficial bacteria thrive, creating natural filters for the water, breaking down waste, and keeping everything clean. These bacteria, our little invisible heroes, are what makes this live rock so special. They work tirelessly to maintain a stable environment. It's like bringing a piece of the ocean's soul into your home, but wait. That's not all. Inside these crevices of the rock, you'll find life in all forms. It's like inviting tiny janitors to take care of your underwater world. But live rock is not always predictable. Sometimes, along with those friendly creatures, you'll get a few uninvited guests. In this instance, I found Aptasia. These anemones can quickly spread all over your reef and start irritating corals and even small animals. So it is important to act quickly so it doesn't spread even further. That's why we're using a product today that will hopefully eradicate these anemones. Later I will also add some natural predators like peppermint shrimp or Bergian nudibranchs. These animals will act as a precautionary measure in case we missed a few of the anemones today. With a syringe we will put some of the product into the mouth of the anemone. Then, in a few minutes time, the anemone will just dissolve. I tried it in an old tank of mine and it works great. And just like that, we might have saved the reef from a catastrophe. Today we're diving deep into the exciting world of our new 100-gallon Saltwater Paludarium. I'll be sharing our journey of transformation and growth, featuring new fish, familiar corals, surprising discoveries, and the challenges we have faced so far. If you are new here, make sure you watch the previous episodes on this project and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss out on future episodes. This project is only just getting started. First up, let's address the notorious salt creep, a big concern on an environment with live plants. For those new to this, salt creep occurs when water evaporates, leaving behind those frustrating white crystals on the tank edges. It not only looks messy, but can also impact the overall health of the paludarium. This was a concern that was expressed by a lot of people in the comments on the previous episodes. And yes, it has been a concern I have been aware of since day one as well. Most plants do not like salt. Actually, most plants die when they are in contact with salt for longer periods. Now there are a few exceptions, like the mangrove plants we have in here. All the other plants are not touching the water. The plants on the left are in a separate container that we built using Acrate and pond liner. For the plants in the middle, however, it's a different story. Over time, the salt will build up on the rocks, creeping up higher and higher, and would eventually catch up to the plants. This forced me to make a few changes as expected. One of the orchids on the mountain and the ant plant on the right, which were closest to the water, looked like they were getting irritated by something. So I did what every crazy hobbyist would do. I got intimate with my plants. I suspected it was the salt creep causing issues. So to find out if this was the actual cause, I tasted the rocks, and they tasted rather salty. I removed the 2 old orchids and put a mangrove in their place. I glued it onto the rock so I can see the roots develop underwater. I bought a bigger orchid and placed it a bit higher on the rocks this time, right above the crack separating the 2 rocks. I think the salt creep will not go much higher than this, but only time will tell. I put the end plant in the plant section on the left in between the other plants. Those are growing pretty fast. As you can see here, we also have to be careful with the moss. That's because the moss will act as a sponge and suck up all the salt water. With a humidifier on a schedule to moist the moss and plants multiple times a day, and a simple spray with RODI water to spray the plants a few times a week, we can hopefully keep them comfortable. RODI water is water often used in saltwater aquariums because it's free of chlorine, heavy metals and other contaminants. It's used to mix salt water and to top off the aquarium for evaporation. Water evaporates, but the salt doesn't. So never top off evaporation on a saltwater aquarium with salt water. Use RODI water instead. Anyways, I am excited to see some growth on these plants and can't wait to see this develop over the next few months. It's a challenge for sure. Now if you've made it this far into the video, consider giving it a thumbs up, it really helps. Stay tuned for the rest of the video because there is a lot left to uncover, including some of my old corals that have made a comeback. Next, let's talk about our little friends, the snails. They are the janitors of the aquarium, helping to keep it clean. While they are doing a great job, I still have to help sometimes because after all, they are small. Very small. While doing a routine cleanup, I stumbled upon small bumps on the glass. I scraped off the first few bumps using my magnet cleaner, but then decided to take a closer look, and to my surprise, I stumbled upon these tiny transparent bubbles with tiny specks in it. We discovered snail eggs. These snails are beneficial to the reef as they can reach places I cannot reach with my hands. However, they can also be quite annoying. When they try to clean the power head, for example, while it's on, it's pretty noisy and usually ends up with the snail flying across the tank. Or, even worse, the power head just stops working and I have to remove the snail from it. I need to get some fine covers for them so the snails can get stuck in it and the flow just continues. Now let's get into something that might raise some eyebrows. These orange rings. You may be asking, what are they and why are they so important? Well, these little guys play a crucial role in our filtration system. This orange substance is called sponge. Sponges are simple multicellular organisms that filter out fine particles, bacteria, and other organic matter from the water. They play a crucial role in the ecosystem by improving water clarity and providing a habitat for beneficial microorganisms. Sponges can be found in various colors and shapes, and their presence often indicates a healthy and stable environment in the aquarium. By introducing these 2 rings, which I took out of a filter at my local fish store, I hope these sponges will eventually settle on the rocks, or even better, on the mangrove roots or the wood, just like they do in the wild. Last week I also introduced this bright orange piece of sponge. Doesn't it look incredible? I really like it. The sponge itself likes low light and medium flow, so we need to find an appropriate spot for it. Do you have any suggestions? In addition to these sponges, I also introduced some other filter feeders, like these tube worms. These filter feeding creatures build tubes that they live in, often attaching itself to the sand, rocks, or even corals. The worm extends delicate, colorful, feathery plumes to catch tiny particles like plankton from the water. While hiding in their tubes, tube worms add movement and beauty to a reef tank, contributing to the ecosystem by helping keeping the water clean through natural filtration. These tube worms come in many different colors, like purple, which we have here, a mix between a few colors, yellow, white. There are quite a few options, and I hope to collect them all. Next to these 2 tube worms, I also have this beautiful piece of Alveopora. It is a coral that I saved from my previous setup and I wanted it in this paludarium. I think it looks really cool here in between the mangroves. This is also the hiding place for the Banggai cardinal fish,
and the other ones that are not supposed to be there. Next up is a big part of our paludarium, the corals. I kept some of my older corals that were in the other aquariums I had set up prior to this new paludarium. My 4-year-old Duncan coral, the chalices, snake Antistraea, lobophilia, and a few zoanthids. I also bought 2 rock anemones. These come in a ton of different colors and I think the tide pool is a great place for them. It's kind of a mess right now with the macroalgae, corals, mangrove leaves and other stuff in there. But over the next few weeks I plan on placing them on the reef itself. There are many things to consider. Each species likes a different amount of flow and lighting, and we also have to consider how they will grow. For example, an Acanthostrea will spread and not really grow in height, while the Duncan coral will also grow in height. I introduced these corals over the course of a few weeks. If you paid attention in last week's episode, which was filmed the week before that, I had already introduced the Duncan and crucifer anemones. Taking things slow is crucial for a reef. The system is very new and undeveloped, so small things can put it out of balance really quick. So far the corals are looking good and the fish seem to enjoy their new home. I even introduced 5 other fish. These are also cardinal fish, a little bigger than the Bengai cardinal fish we introduced earlier, but I like them. I was hoping they would claim and defend their own territory and form 2 separate groups, but so far they don't seem too bothered by each other. A lot of people also pointed out that the Bengai cardinals will fight each other as they grow, and only one pair of fish might survive because of that. So as they grow we will clearly see which fish will form pairs, and will remove the others where necessary. I also placed some macroalgae on the rocks. Some of these will grow very fast, like the feather caulerpa and grape caulerpa. They are pretty invasive to be honest. So we'll have to keep them in shape by cutting them down during our weekly maintenance routine. Now because I want to go for a somewhat natural look with this aquarium, it will not really be a super clean and sterile looking reef. Along with these new additions, I installed another return pump to improve water circulation. I discovered there wasn't much flow in this part of the reef. It's very difficult to get it right in a 250 cm or 8 foot long aquarium. Fortunately, I could still hide it behind these rocks. This was a game changer because this new pump ensures that water flows better throughout the entire tank. This is really crucial for coral health. It helps distribute nutrients, heat, and keeps everything well oxygenated. As you can see, our saltwater paludarium is thriving with these new changes. Each step, whether dealing with salt creep, snails, or introducing new life, has been an adventure filled with lessons. The balance of this ecosystem is very delicate, but watching it flourish makes it all worthwhile. It's been 55 days since I added water to my saltwater paludarium. Over the past few weeks we added some macroalgae, anemones, fish, including my sleepy clownfish. Trust me, it's doing fine, just very lazy and old. All the fish and macroalgae are doing great, the plants are growing, and I am so happy about this setup so far. Look at this giant leaf, isn't it gorgeous? The mangroves are looking better and better, and I really like how this soon-to-be mangrove forest is looking. I think the paludarium is off to a great start, but that's not the case for all life. I spotted a small crab on the left side of the aquarium. It's dead. By the looks of it, the crab is not reef safe, so it's probably good that it didn't make it. I think it hitchhiked into this aquarium through the live rock from Indonesia we added when we set it up. Usually when a crab has black claws like this one, it's likely to eat coral. I suspect something else that hitchhiked into the aquarium through the live rock killed this crab. Every night I can hear loud pops. This means a pistol shrimp lives in the aquarium. I haven't seen it yet, but I hear it every night. It wouldn't surprise me if the pistol shrimp got rid of this nasty crab for me. The paludarium is developing really well and I think it's time to add some more life to the reef. Now I still have a few corals that I saved from my previous aquariums. One of these, the Duncan coral, has been with me for 4 years. Of course, it's making a comeback on this reef. Besides these old pieces, I also picked up some gorgeous new corals and some filter feeders from a local shop. Alrighty, it's time to get our hands wet and start adding some life to our rocks.
But first, let's put on some gloves because chances are it can get quite messy when we start gluing these new corals to the rocks. And that's not all, because handling corals can be dangerous as well. Some coral contain toxin that could cause some very nasty infections and allergic reactions. If you have a small cut on your finger, there is a very high probability that you'll run into some issues down the road. So let's be safe and wear some gloves. There's a bunch of very cool and interesting animals we are adding to the aquarium today, so please stick around and make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Also, while you're at it, consider giving this video a thumbs up. It really helps. Alrighty, without further ado, let's get started. One of the first corals I want to add to the rocks is this gorgeous green Platygira coral, also known as the maze brain coral. This coral is often found between mangroves in the wild, but also lives in deeper water. I've had great success with it in my previous setups. To add it to the rocks, we are using some aquarium superglue. We apply a little bit of this glue on the bottom of the rock that the coral sits on and position it on the rock. I always struggle with this, and it requires quite a bit of wiggling around before it's stuck on there. And to be honest, it can become quite frustrating sometimes. These beautiful LPS corals come in a great variety of colors, so we can add a lot more later on. I bought two very cool animals for the tide pool that I think will look great in there. These are called cylinder anemones. You have to be very careful with these anemones as they can sting corals around them. That's why I think the tide pool is a great spot for them. They come in many different colors, so we can collect a lot more. I'm really excited about this piece, but more on that later. Think I found the perfect corals for this spot right here, Gorgonians. If you watched the video where we built this paludarium, you'd know that I put a power head on the right side of the tide pool. With a lot of flow, they'll have plenty of opportunity to catch food. I also bought a few more sponges, but for those we need to restructure a part of the reef. I found a gorgeous looking blue sponge on some live rock and don't want to break it off of there. Sponges are very delicate. They cannot be out of the water as that could easily kill them. Sponges are great filter feeders. With a lot of live plankton in the water, I think they will do great. I was struggling to find a nice spot for my 4-year-old Duncan coral, but I think right here it will look incredible. The polyps are closed up right now, but once it settles in, it'll be much bigger. This setup is not the easiest when it comes to picking corals, as we're not using the bright blue LEDs you see on most tanks. Most corals will look brown in a setup with a wider spectrum like this one. The plants don't like blue light and it doesn't look natural, so we have to use these settings. I think we did a pretty good job so far, don't you think? There is a lot more to choose from. Do you have any tips or suggestions? It has now been 24 hours since we added these new pieces to the saltwater aquarium, and I think it's a great idea to clarify some things. As some of you might have already commented on by now, sponges, filter feeders and mandarin dragonet fish are usually introduced after the aquarium has been set up for over a year or so. This is because they are quite picky eaters and require a constant supply of live food, such as live copepods and plankton. In a new system, this can become a challenge. Often our filters filter out most of the fine particles that these creatures need in order to survive. In this case, however, we set up the aquarium with live sand, some live rocks, and we used natural seawater to kickstart the bacteria. I've seen a ton of small pots on the glass, rocks and sand since the start of this new adventure. By feeding live copepods and plankton multiple times a week, I think we are more than capable of providing these creatures with enough food. Another added benefit to this system is that it doesn't have any mechanical filtration, which makes this water so much better for these filter feeders. About 2 or 3 weeks ago I added 2 sponges to this aquarium and they have been doing really well, so I doubt they are starving. I noticed some people were also worried about these sand-sifting starfish that we added in the first 3 weeks or so. People were worried that these animals would starve as it is a new system, but so far they seem to be very healthy and active. I'm feeding my fish plenty of food, ranging from live foods to dry foods like flakes and pellets. I think the animals in this aquarium won't be hungry anytime soon, but it is a very fair point to be concerned about. In my previous aquarium, the 40-gallon shallow reef, I added a Christmas rock pretty early on as well. I even set up that aquarium using sand and rocks that didn't contain any beneficial bacteria. And still the Christmas tree worms thrived. I am confident that this piece will thrive as well, as this setup is much better. The gorgonians have their polyps out filtering through the water. There's a power head nearby which is sucking water right past these polyps. I think they look pretty happy and will have plenty of food to feed on. These crazy looking things are called sea squirts. They are also filter feeders. And to be honest, they kind of remind me of some organs. What do you think? Aren't they crazy? I recently added a small return pump in the back of the aquarium that is blowing water right over them. This part of the reef is the area with the least amount of flow. But as you can see on the Duncan coral, it's not too bad at all. I can always add a bigger return pump later on if necessary. I glued a few zoanthids on top of the rocks near the waterline and on some wood on the left side of the aquarium. I think this will look very cool once they start growing in a little bit more. I threw some other zoophragms into the tide pool because they were all closed up when we were working on the aquarium and I had no idea what colors they had. I will find a better spot for them next week or so. The two cylinder anemones are looking really good in this tide pool. I'm not too sure what else I want to add in there, but I think some different colors of crucifer anemones would look awesome in there. The Calastrea or candy cane corals you see in here are not looking too happy right now, I have to say. They came out of my other aquarium, but weren't in the best position. I'll find a good spot for them later once they heal up a little bit. I added a few other species of coral into the aquarium as well, and I am sure they will look really good once we get more of them in different colors. I can't wait to see the macroalgae grow out a little bit more, but I am already really happy with the way that the reef is looking after the first batch of coral. I left my aquarium unattended for a whole 10 days while I was away on holiday. Consequently, algae quickly overtook the aquarium, but don't worry, I made sure fish got fed and the plants had enough water. The rocks and sand are covered in algae, and as you can see there is a thick layer on the glass as well. Today it's time to do some maintenance on my Saltwater Paludarium. I am showing you how I access the pumps that are hidden behind the reef underneath the rocks and the full process of keeping my aquarium healthy and clean. Now we did run into a small problem, but more on that later. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and make sure you check out the previous episodes of our new Saltwater Paludarium. Let's get started. I instructed my uncle to feed the fish daily and spray the plants with RODI water every other day, but I didn't want to bother him with cleaning the glass or doing any other maintenance. A small amount of algae is not a problem, but not feeding the fish or watering the plants is. I placed cups of copepods, plankton and Artemia shrimp in the refrigerator so that he could easily add one of each to the tank daily. Back in the day when I worked at a fish store, I heard numerous horrifying stories about family members recklessly dumping entire jars of food into the aquarium, leading to catastrophic tank crashes. By carefully portioning the food into cups, I was confident that everything would be fine. Thankfully, it all worked out perfectly. The corals are looking happy and healthy, but of course the gorgonians closed up just as I pressed record on my phone. However, I did notice something else. One of the plants is not looking well, the mimosa plant. This is a sensitive plant that reacts when you touch its leaves. When you do, they close up. It was doing great right before I left. It even blossomed. But when I came back it looked totally different, closed up and dried up. When taking a closer look at it, it seems that parts that were the closest to the light above it had all shriveled up. I suspect that the blue LED right above it slowly burned the plant. I plan on switching this light cluster with a freshwater cluster. Plants prefer a daylight spectrum over a blue spectrum. And now that's one of the advantages of using these lights by Illumagic. You can easily make changes if necessary. By cutting these damaged and dried up twigs off, I prevent them from falling into the water and clogging up the surface skimmer. As you can see, there is some biofilm on the water now. The sponge inside the surface skimmer became saturated with fish gunk and plant matter. Usually I have to put in some new filter floss once a week. This is pretty easy. We now have a pretty ugly spot on our plant mountain, but I saved some moss from when we built this aquarium, so now we can use that moss to fill up this gap. The other twigs look fine, so we'll keep those and see what happens. I have to make sure that the moss is nice and moist, either with my humidifier or mist maker, or by spraying it with RODI water. It is now time to fix our underwater world, but first, I like turning off the power head so we can get a better look at what needs to be done. I still have to do some cable management. Right now I still have cables in every one of my drawers, which is not a good idea. To clean the algae off the glass, I like to use a piece of filter floss. Because it's white, I can easily tell when I miss a spot. The only thing I have to make sure of is that I don't get too close to the sand bed. It will be a disaster if some sand gets stuck in between the glass and the filter floss. We don't want any scratches. Now if you clean your glass frequently, you don't have to apply a ton of pressure to remove the algae. To clean the area close to the sandbed, I like ripping off a very small piece of filter floss. After doing a small part of the glass, I throw it right in the trash. This is to make sure that we keep using a sand-free piece of filter floss. I repeat the same process on the other sides of the Saltwater Paludarium. I like to keep it very clean. Next up, it's time to clean the sandbed. As you can see, some algae build up on top of it. With an aquascaping tool, I can easily make it look a lot better and cleaner. This is also a great tool to level out the sand a little bit more. Sometimes flow, fish, or other factors can move a ton of sand. Of course, we can't forget about the tide pool. Even the sand in there could use some TLC. Well guys, that's another step completed, and as you can see, the tank is already looking a lot better, but we haven't even done the most important steps yet. When we built this aquarium, we hid the equipment behind the reef, underneath the rocks. The return pumps that ensure flow throughout the aquarium and the heater are all located underneath these rocks. A lot of people were wondering if they were still accessible, and yes they are. I can easily take them out of there and clean the intakes when necessary. On the left side of the aquarium, I can just lift up the plants and reach into the equipment compartment like that. The tank is looking much better, but I still have to do a small water change. I'll be taking out about 25 liters or 6.5 gallons. I also take this as an opportunity to clean the equipment compartments. Small particles build up in those areas, so this is a great way to ensure it stays nice and clean. This is better for the equipment as well. Now this is something I really like. With the water drained, the edges of the tide pool are exposed to the outside air and it looks just like a natural tide pool. Isn't this amazing? The effect would be even better if I drained some more water, but this week I only plan on doing a small water change. Okay, it's time to fill the tank back up with new, clean salt water. I mixed some RODI water with my trusted Fritz Aquatics Blue Label salt mix, and I put a heater in there to make sure it was at the same temperature as the aquarium. The next step is to turn back on all the flow. The water is still a little bit cloudy, so I like adding some clarifier to it. fridge clarifier rapidly clears water by pulling together fine particles, allowing them to be removed by the filter or settle to the bottom, which is the case in my tank because I don't have a filter. I also add some live nitrifying bacteria and spray the plants a little bit more with RODI water. The final step of the maintenance routine is to clean the outside of the aquarium. For this you can use RODI water or a safe spray. You don't want any chemicals to leach into your aquarium. That could easily kill tons of marine life, which you definitely don't want to happen. Water and salt stains look nasty, so make sure you get rid of those. This process took me about 1.5 hours, and after all this, it's time to wait. The next morning the water has cleared up and the tank looks so much better. Corals seem happy, plants look good and the fish are living their best life. Now a lot of people told me that the Bengai cardinals we added earlier weren't the best idea. They will fight each other to death later on, so that's something we don't want to happen. Before I left on holiday I was able to catch out the majority of them and return them to the fish store. I still have 4 of them in here now, hopefully 2 pairs. From the beginning, not all of them were schooling together. I think there are far better options. Now I do really like the other cardinals. They really school together and swim all over the tank. The tube worms on the right are pretty annoying sometimes. Whenever I want to take pictures or video them, they retract into their tubes. So annoying. But either way, these animals are really awesome. Let's add some live food to the aquarium so the fish and corals have something to snack on. Some live copepods, plankton and Artemia shrimp ensure everyone has a nice meal. Just look at them, they're going nuts for it. Now I would really like to know what you feed your fish, so please let us know in the comment section down below. The macroalgae is growing pretty good and the sponges look healthy as well. Depending on the time of day, I can also enjoy the gorgonians with their polyps out. Sometimes they are not. It's been 100 days since we turned my Saltwater Paludarium to life. This project has turned my bedroom into a tropical oasis, and I can't wait to show you how this ecosystem has developed since our last video. This might just be the biggest update yet. We added new life, but also faced some major setbacks, and I did things that I thought were never possible. In this video we're covering it all, from the recent developments to the latest failures. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Wait, did you see that? Where did it go? Ah, there it is. This is a Falco's hawkfish, one of our latest additions to the Saltwater Paludarium, a pin-sized predator with a big personality. Perched atop of rocks, corals or in this case macroalgae, its spiky dorsal fin flares like a crown, giving it an air of authority. Its pale body is patterned with intricate red bands, blending seamlessly with the reef. He is a master of camouflage and a great hunter. This tiny guardian watches with keen, expressive eyes, scanning for the slightest movement of unsuspecting prey. Should we name this new fish? Leave your suggestions down below. The hawkfish likes to hang out on the right side of the Saltwater Paludarium. There is so much to discover here. From our rock with tube worms that are busy filtering the water with their fans to the sponges in the back and the mangroves in between, he loves it all. I recently added some cool macroalgae in this corner as well. It will take some time to settle in, but once it does, we really have to keep up with regular maintenance because these will take over for sure. And wait, why does the sand look different here? Oh look, it's the sand cucumber working its way throughout the aquarium cleaning the sand. How cool is this? Alrighty, let's move up a little bit. Let's take a look inside the tide pool. These three corals, a species called Alveopora, looks really cool here. I think we should buy a few more in different colors. And man, look at this opening in the tide pool. It's like a portal. Let's take a look inside. I added one more rock flower anemone. This one has a lot of orange and yellow tints to it. When I put it in there, it stayed in the perfect spot for a few days, but then it decided it was time to move. Unfortunately, it moved right in between the macroalgae, so it's a bit hidden for now. But oh well, if the anemone likes it there, I'm happy. The fast-growing macroalgae gives the tide pool a natural look. Something I really like. This was my goal. But unfortunately for us, it becomes more difficult to spot smaller forms of life, like these tiny shrimp we added in there. Sexy shrimp and Peterson's cleaner shrimp are awesome additions to this aquarium, but they are so small it's hard to see them. I also placed a yellow feather duster worm in between the mangroves, and it looks like there is another one in the back as well. I am not going to lie, I like this messy look. It looks really natural. But we do have to keep certain macroalgae in check, otherwise they will take over the entire tank and kill everything else. Now this is pretty cool as well. Look at the white crust on the trunk of these mangroves. It's salt. In the wild, this salt gets washed off with the tides. Unfortunately, my aquarium doesn't have a tide system, so I have to spray it off manually. I am so happy with the way that the tide pool is taking shape. It's the perfect hideaway for small critters. But wait, what's that in the back? That looks really weird. Well, I never thought this day would come, but Danny's Aquariums bought a filter for his aquarium. As you know, if you are a regular viewer, all my previous aquariums were set up without the use of mechanical filtration. They all relied on biological filtration through beneficial bacteria that live in the water. So you may ask, why did I get a filter this time? Well, it's simply for simplicity. There are no sponges inside the filter, so technically not much has changed to my no filter stance on reef keeping. The main purpose of this filter is to improve flow and heating throughout the aquarium. The middle part of the aquarium had the least amount of flow. It's an 8-foot long aquarium or 250 centimeters, so it's a big challenge to get it right all throughout the tank. We put a smaller return pump behind the reef rocks a few weeks ago, but it really wasn't cutting it. This new pump is capable of moving 400 gallons an hour. That's a lot more than the 80-gallon pump we had in here before. But okay, that's one thing fixed. Flow is now perfect. But next, let's talk about heating. When we built this aquarium, we put a large heater behind the tide pool, but the return pump close to it only pushed water to the right side of the tank. I figured we could make heating this tank so much more efficient by using an internal heater. This new filter is a great new addition. Right now it sucks water in from the right side of the tank, runs it past the heater and blows it back into the left side of the aquarium, which flows back towards the right side. Another added benefit is that I was able to install a surface skimming intake on it. This intake replaces the small electrical driven surface skimmer I used previously. This was an annoying device because I had to service it every few days, because the little sponge inside of there would become saturated with waste. And yes, you are right, this is a stainless steel intake, and yes, this will cause problems. It will start rusting one day or another, and that's a fact. I bought a glass intake, but well, what do you think happened with that? Yep, I broke it. So then I went back to the local fish store and bought the last one they had in stock, and yes, I broke that one as well. Don't even ask, okay? It even caused the power to go out in the entire house, but let's move on from that. I did find a stainless steel intake, so for now I just put it on there, and hopefully it should be fine. In the next few days I'll get a new glass intake, and let's hope that goes a lot smoother than the previous 2 times. 3 times a charm, right? Now let's move up a little further and check out the plant mountain. As you can see, it has grown a lot, and more importantly, no salt issues. Over 3 months in and the plants are still doing great. Look at the growth on this bromeliad. And check out this plant. It's wrapping itself around the rocks. The biggest plant of them all, the asparagus fern, is growing really fast. It is now even reaching towards the light. Now next to this big piece is a smaller camo plant. I bought it at a convention last week. I think it's a great addition. Despite these positive developments, we also faced a major issue on the left side of the aquarium that had me worried about the future of the Saltwater Paludarium, but more on that later. Let's move back down into the underwater world of our giant Saltwater Paludarium. A friend of mine gave me some very cool Aquarium corals. I put them together in this spot for now, but might move a few to other parts of the reef to make it look more natural and not so much like a man-made arrangement of coral. Now, if you couldn't tell by my horrible accent, I live in Europe. Unfortunately, macroalgae are rarely seen on the market here because there is a lot of bureaucracy involved. But having lots of cool macroalgae in my tank was a dream, so I went the extra mile and spent way too much money on some algae. It was a difficult process, but I managed to import a few species of macroalgae through a supplier who imported it all out of Indonesia. So, considering this, please give this video a thumbs up, it really helps. Unfortunately, not all of them are looking good, but I have hopes that they will recover. You can already see some new green growth on this one. I think they are pretty resilient and will be fine. I also bought a pair of new fish, 2 beautiful filefish. And to be honest, they are hard to spot sometimes. Their camouflage is great. These fish are the reef's quiet observers. As you spend more time observing the tank, you notice how these filefish bring a new sense of calm to the environment. Unlike the more boisterous species that dart and chase around, filefish move slowly and deliberately. They have a curious and intelligent nature, often hovering in front of a coral or rock, investigating every nook and cranny. They also help with pest control by eating unwanted Aiptasia anemones, the ones that we spotted on our live rock earlier. I think these fish are a great new addition to the saltwater ecosystem. And maybe by now you've noticed something else about the paludarium that has changed, perhaps a pretty big change. This had me worried like you can't even imagine. A few weeks ago I found a ton of white flies on one of my plants. One of the big plants on the left was infested with pests. This was a worst case scenario because treating it with chemicals wasn't an option. It would kill all the life inside the aquarium and wreck the system for good. So instead I decided to quickly put the plant inside a trash bag and suck up anything that fell off with a vacuum cleaner. A few days later, after making sure I didn't see any other pests, I put some new plants in that spot, and these seem to do great. It looks like we really dodged a bullet here, but I am sure that this won't be the last challenge we will face on this system. Today we have yet another exciting update on the 100-gallon Saltwater Paludarium. We'll explore some fascinating new developments in the aquarium and review a bold experiment. Introducing freshwater fish into a saltwater ecosystem. Yes, you heard that right. Freshwater fish in a saltwater setup. It's an unconventional twist and I can't wait to show you how it all comes together. Be sure to subscribe, sit back and let's dive right in. Before I introduce these new and exciting additions to the ecosystem, let's take a look at some other developments. Last night I was sitting in front of the aquarium and I wasn't happy with what I saw. One of the pieces of macroalgae didn't look good. Some smaller pieces had fallen off and were caught by the power head, causing them to be blown all over the reef tank. I decided to use the fragments and wedge some of them in between the rocks. But one thing led to another and I ended up doing a small rescape on this part of the aquarium. The rocks in this area are Indonesian live rocks. I had originally built a small separate island near the front of the aquarium using these rocks, but I wasn't satisfied with the way that it looked. It blocked the view, making it hard to observe what was going on behind it, or see the wood we placed there. There was a big area behind it, let's call it Reef Estate. But because the views were getting blocked by this rock, it ended up using its value for this aquarium. But that wasn't the only reason for this change. The loose macroalgae also highlighted another problem. Many of them got stuck in one place. This meant that the flow wasn't optimal. To fix this, I decided to break up the large piece of rock and move some of it further back, creating more space between the glass and the rocks. I also spread the pieces further apart. Now I have two smaller pieces of rock that I can fully utilize for corals and macroalgae. In my opinion, this looks so much better. The tank feels more open, the flow is improved, and the added depth makes the tank look way bigger. Now, ever since I installed the new filter for flow and heating on this aquarium, the Duncan coral had been closed up. I think it wasn't happy with the increased flow. However, I left it there for a few days, hoping it would acclimate. But if it stayed closed for too long, I had to move it because it would starve and die, as it couldn't extend its polyps to feed itself. And unfortunately, this ended up being the case. For now, I moved it onto this rock, and this morning it was fully open again. Of course, as soon as I wanted to film, it closed up, which is typical. As for the Turbinaria coral, I placed it where the Duncan coral originally was. It hadn't been doing well on the right side of the tank either, but it seems much happier in its new spot. Look at its polyps, they are fully extended. Sitting in front of the system is such a treat. You see all kinds of life, from fish darting around to small shrimp and starfish cleaning the rocks and sand. It is awesome. Yesterday I noticed something on top of one of my snails. These very small green flower looking things. Now it can be one of two things. A species of macroalgae or perhaps a species of soft coral. What do you think this is? Now look at the Alveopora corals we added last week. They are doing very well. The one in the back, however, has shorter and smaller polyps, so I will probably move it to the front of the aquarium more. It also seems to have a piece of dragon's bread on top of it, which really doesn't help it either. One of the Peterson's cleaner shrimp decided to move into this area of the reef, the Alveopora garden. It has not moved out of there for days, so this is pretty cool to see. It's so small. I love how this part of the reef is starting to look with the tube worms, mangroves, macroalgae and other marine life. The longer you look, the more you'll see. But wait, are we looking at a freshwater planet aquarium? No, this is the feather caulerpa that's growing all over the place. This species of macroalgae is considered invasive. As you can see, it grows extremely fast and all over the place. Compared to last week, it has grown a lot. I even trimmed it down a bunch yesterday during the rescape. It pretty much closed up the entire tide pool, hiding all the life that was inside of it. So I decided to cut some of it away. I think this is going to be part of my weekly maintenance routine. Another disadvantage to these fast-growing macroalgae is that the portal to the tide pool is closing up really fast. So soon I'll have to trim this macroalgae as well. But this is awesome to see. This is a high nutrient system. Mangroves, macroalgae and filter feeders need a dirty aquarium. Because higher levels of nitrates and phosphates are a must when you successfully want to grow macroalgae and mangroves. As these plants and algae grow, they will consume more and more of this. I really have to start keeping track of these nutrients and some trace elements through water tests to make sure that they have enough. One of the disadvantages of high nutrients is that algae grows fast, and no, this time I'm not talking about the macroalgae I like, but more about the nuisance algae. On the mangrove trunks, some parts of the reef and the wood we added, certain species of algae are starting to proliferate. By the appearance of it, it mainly seems to be hair algae and sea lettuce. Now, if left untouched, this can become a huge problem, but hopefully we can keep it in check with these new freshwater fish. Let's check it out. I was recently introduced to something that blew my mind: keeping freshwater fish in a saltwater aquarium. I thought I was being pranked, but as I looked into it more, my jaw dropped. There are certain species of fish that can transfer from freshwater to saltwater and back. If you have kept freshwater fish before, you may recognize black mollies, sailfin mollies, and even certain guppies. It turns out They can all be acclimated to salt water, and they are the perfect, budget-friendly and algae-eating saltwater fish. Acclimating them is a timely process, but quarantining them for parasites or diseases is not needed. Freshwater diseases can transfer to saltwater fish or even survive in saltwater. Sailfin mollies are very adaptable. They live in all sorts of waters, from freshwater to slightly salted water, which is called brackish water, to actual salt water like we have in this aquarium. In the wild, they will actually swim back and forth between freshwater and saltwater all the time. I read many different methods on how to acclimate these fish to a saltwater aquarium. From tossing them into the aquarium straight out of the bag to drip acclimating them in a separate container for up to a week. I've read some articles online and watched some videos on YouTube, one from Reef, the most popular saltwater blog in the industry, and it seems that most of them drip acclimate them overnight. So that's exactly what I will be doing as well. I did read that the freshwater bred versions don't do too well in the long term and you may lose some of the fish. But newer generations will do so much better. So hopefully these two females can have some babies and maybe we can form an algae eating army. I am using a bucket with fresh water and place it into a bigger container, just in case it overflows overnight. I have a heater and a small filter inside the bucket to make sure that the temperature stays the same and the water gets aerated. I'm using a process called drip acclimation, where salt water is slowly introduced into the bucket by dripping down from the aquarium. This ensures a slow and steady acclimation to salt water for these fish. And while they're acclimating, there are some other things I'd like to show you. Yesterday, when I was taking a closer look at the reef, I noticed a crab, but it's one I didn't introduce on purpose. It hitchhiked into the aquarium through the live rock we added when we set it up. If you've watched the previous episodes on this Saltwater Paludarium, you'd know that this is not the first time that we found a dead crab. It's happened before. The only crab I added in here deliberately is a decorator crab. It has incredible camouflage. Perhaps the best form of camouflage in the entire underwater animal kingdom. It collects all sorts of stuff from all over the reef. Now, I had a hard time spotting it, but I finally found it hiding underneath this rock inside the sand. Can you see it? Okay, back to the dead crab. I suspect that our pistol shrimp, which also hitchhiked into the tank, played a big role in taking out this tiny little critter. But maybe it just died naturally. Who knows? The asparagus fern is growing incredibly fast. Compared to last week's video, it has grown a lot. Yesterday I cut off a small part of the plant because the leaf turned yellow. But overall it seems to be doing great. It looks like the orchids have finished blossoming as well. Now, I'm pretty new to this, but do I cut off these twigs or just leave them be? Let me know in the comments. It's now been 3 hours and the freshwater sailfin mollies are still looking good. I think it's time to head to bed and check in on them in the morning. Well, good morning guys, we're back and the sailfin mollies have been acclimating to salt water for about 15 hours now. It is time to set them free into their new home, the Saltwater Paludarium. But before we do that, we have to make sure that the salt levels inside the bucket are the exact same as the aquarium. A quick check with my refractometer confirmed that the salinity levels matched. It is time to set them free. Now I hope they've taken care of our emerging algae problem by the time I post the next update. We'll see. Just look at these fish. This is going to be very controversial. Some people will hate these fish and others will love them. A quick poll about a week ago showed people were very divided. Respectively, 62% thought this was an awesome idea and 38% thought it was boring. What do you think? Over the past few weeks I've had to deal with a number of problems in my saltwater aquarium. From a distance it looks like the tank is thriving, and in most aspects it is. But when we take a closer look, even closer than this, there are signs that something is horribly wrong. In this new update we'll go over the recent developments in the Saltwater Paludarium and how we can hopefully save these animals. I have never experienced anything like this. If you are new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up. Sit back, relax, and let's get started. First up, let's check out the freshwater fish we added during the video before this one, the 3 sailfin mollies.
All 3 of them, the male and 2 females, are alive and seem to be doing well. Unfortunately, they were struggling a bit during the first 2 weeks, but they seem to have recovered really well. I think these 3 fish were a great addition to the Saltwater Paludarium. Last week when I was looking at the aquarium at night, right before going to bed, I noticed something. I saw a lot of small dark dots on the sand. Upon taking a closer look, I noticed they were fish, baby fish. It looks like the female selfin mollies gave birth to some babies. I counted about 30 fish or so. They were very small. But oh no, something is lurking in the background. The decorator crab sits motionless in the aquarium, its camouflage blending perfectly with the rocks and algae. It's a master of disguise. When I first noticed these tiny fry in the aquarium, their translucent bodies catching glimmers of light, I couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. They were so small, so fragile, like sparks of light flickering in the water. But now they are nowhere to be seen. Were they smart enough to hide, finding refuge among the crevices of the rocks or the macroalgae? Or did they meet a far darker fate, becoming a meal for the ever-hungry inhabitants of my aquarium? I suspect the latter. It seems all too likely that most of these delicate little creatures didn't make it through the night. The tank is full of opportunists, from the swift-moving fish to the cunning crabs and sneaky snails. Every flick of a tail or ripple of movement holds a potential threat for these baby fish. Today I've searched every corner of the aquarium, peered behind every piece of macroalgae, but the babies are gone. Ghosts of what once was. It's a harsh reminder of the balance of life in this tiny underwater world. Survival here isn't a guarantee. It is a gamble, and most of the time, the odds aren't kind. If conditions get a little stressful, like competition for nutrients or overcrowding, some types of macroalgae may decide to reproduce sexually. The signs are pretty obvious. Parts of the algae starts looking pale, translucent, or even slimy. And then, boom, it disintegrates and releases a cloudy substance into the water. Most of the time when this happens, it happens to Caulerpa species. These fast-growing macroalgae seem to have a habit of it. Fortunately, this cloudiness in the water isn't harmful for a big system like this. It just gets consumed by the filter feeders in the tank and broken down by beneficial bacteria. In a smaller aquarium, you should do a water change, because it can spike your nutrient levels, and this in turn can lead to problems. When I noticed some hair algae started to form on the back of the aquarium a few weeks ago, I knew I needed a natural solution: sea urchins. These little guys are incredible. Within days they got to work grazing on every patch of hair algae they could find. These sea urchins did an amazing job clearing up the hair algae problem. But now they've developed a taste for the good stuff. After finishing the hair algae, they turn their attention to my prized macroalgae. And while they do help trim it down a bit, they don't do it evenly. They will also spread some invasive macroalgae like feather Caulerpa to other parts of the aquarium. This is not part of the plan, so I'll have to move these sea urchins to a new tank soon. But don't worry, I'm working on a few projects. Stay tuned. They've done their job here, so now it is time for a new assignment. If you've made it this far, please give this video a thumbs up and say hi in the comment section down below. As you can see, 2 very cool blue fish are swimming across the aquarium all the time. They are kind of video bombing this video. These fish are called cleaner wrasses, and they are here to help us manage a major issue. But before we go into that, let me show you the other animals I added. When I added porcelain crabs in my aquarium, I knew they'd be cool. These little guys are like the ultimate blend of function and flair. Perched on rocks or nestled among corals, they use their delicate fan-like claws to filter feed, waving them gracefully in the current like tiny underwater ballerinas. Despite their delicate appearance, they hold their own in the reef, grabbing a cozy spot and sticking to it like they own the place. Watching these crabs adds a whole new level of charm to the aquarium. I recently also discovered a surprise guest, a beautiful red Dolabella sea hare. These fascinating creatures are incredible algae eaters, and I couldn't believe my luck finding one in my aquarium. It must have hitchhiked its way into the aquarium on some macroalgae or something a while back. Now it's happily munching away, helping to keep the tank clean and balanced. Watching it glide over the glass is mesmerizing. It's like having an underwater gardener. Sometimes the best surprises in reef keeping are the ones you never expect. But this is not always the case. Because a few weeks ago I started noticing some spots on my cardinal fish, and later this spread to the sailfin mollies and clownfish. We are facing a major problem. As you might have noticed by now, the cardinals are no longer here. They did not survive. This is terrible news. We are facing a saltwater ick outbreak. This parasite can easily hitchhike into a tank, often through new fish, inverts, or even live rock or coral. The catalyst for ick becoming visible is often stress-related. Changes in water quality, temperature fluctuations, overcrowding, or the introduction of new tank mates can weaken a fish immune system, giving the parasite the upper hand. And once it's present in the aquarium, a stressed fish makes it easier for the parasite to complete its life cycle, leading to outbreaks like this one. Of course, there was a way to avoid this from happening by going through a rigid quarantine process for everything we add to the aquarium. This means rocks, corals, fish, inverts, everything. But executing this is nearly impossible for most reef keepers. Let's face it, almost no one will be able to do this the correct way. Either way, the parasite found its way into the aquarium, and there are ways we can manage it. This parasite has a complex life cycle. It attaches to the fish, feeding and growing as visible white cysts on the fish, and later it falls off, multiplying before reinfecting its hosts. Left unchecked, it can become a real threat to the aquarium. To make sure we were dealing with this parasite in particular and not something else, I worked with a reef vet to examine a sample under the microscope. And there it was, clear evidence of marine ick. Here's the hard truth. There's no reef-safe treatment for saltwater ick. While copper or hyposalinity treatments work in a quarantine tank, they can't be used in a reef system without harming corals and invertebrates. The only way to fully eliminate ick from an aquarium is a fallow period, removing all fish for 6 to 8 weeks to break the parasite's life cycle. If there's no host, the parasite will die. But for me, that's not an option, as we won't be able to catch out all the nanogobies that live in between the rocks. So instead, I'm focusing on supporting my fish. A strong immune system is their best defense. And as long as they stay healthy and well fed, they can fight off the parasite and live with it. I also added 2 cleaner wrasses and a cleaner shrimp. These animals will help eat parasites off of the fish. For now, I won't be adding any new fish. My priority is keeping these fish strong and ensuring they survive. It's a tough situation, but reef keeping is full of challenges, and this is just one more to navigate. For the next few months, we will focus on shaping the reef itself. We will be adding corals and invertebrates as they are unaffected by this marine parasite. We will also make improvements to the plant section above the water. It will look epic. 2 of my mollies have some damage on their back fin. I've been observing the tank and I do see some aggression between the cleaner wrasses and the mollies. So perhaps they are the ones that have caused this. We'll have to keep an eye on that because maybe the cleaner wrasses or the mollies have to move out. I was recommended to give these wounded fish an iodine bath in a separate container to make sure that the wounds don't get affected. A little less than 2 weeks ago, I was kind of worried for my clownfish. They had ick and some mucus issues, and it looked horrible. But like the other fish, we looked under the microscope and we were assured that it's just ick and nothing else. I can say that the clownfish is looking 100 times better now. But as you can see, it still has some pale spots. But I'm sure those will heal as well. The pair of clownfish also decided to move into the Alveopora garden. It's possible that there is some warfare going on between the coral and the fish, causing these pale spots. I'm not sure. One of the best investments for this setup so far has been my canister filter. Except for some ceramic rings, it's empty. It doesn't really filter anything with sponges. But the beneficial bacteria that live on these ceramic rings help break down toxic waste like ammonia. The main purpose of this device is to heat the aquarium. Since it has an internal heater, It provides more flow and it skims off the surface of the water. Without that, an oily looking biofilm would form, as you could see in some previous videos. And yes, you can get the same results with a sump and an overflow, but I didn't want that. Maybe you've noticed something else in the tank as well. The massive Space Invader chalice is gone. It got so big, I decided to let a friend frag it with a bandsaw. It opened up a nice spot here in the front of the aquarium, so we can now easily see the back of the tank. Some setbacks, some improvements, there is always something to learn when it comes to reef keeping. A few weeks ago we discovered that my fish have saltwater ick. This is definitely not something you want in your aquarium. Unfortunately, we also lost some fish, but I doubt this was due to this parasite. I suspect a bacterial infection caused trouble, as it was solely the cardinal species that suffered fatalities. I was especially worried about my clownfish. It looked rough and beaten up, but under the microscope all I found was saltwater ick. Meanwhile, my sailfin mollies had their back fins ripped apart due to aggression. Things were not looking good at all. So today we're checking in to see how things are going now. Is the parasite under control, or are we still fighting this battle? But before we dive into that, my sea urchins have officially become a problem. Don't get me wrong, I love these guys, but they are absolutely tearing apart my reef tank. So it's time for them to move out of the aquarium. On a more exciting note, we've also added some new corals, and today we're introducing some new fish. I can't wait to show you what we picked up and how they're settling into the aquarium. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, sit back, relax and enjoy. First things first, saltwater ick. 2 weeks ago I posted a video about a major issue in my Saltwater Paludarium, white spot disease or saltwater ick. This posed a big challenge because there's no reef safe cure for this parasite. Instead we talked about ways we can manage it. Ick is actually present in many aquariums, but as long as the fish are stress-free and well fed, it won't necessarily lead to a full-blown outbreak like we experienced. Now you might be wondering, why are you adding new fish if you have a parasite in the aquarium that can kill them? Well, the parasite seems to be under control now. The video I posted 2 weeks ago was partly filmed before Christmas, and since then I haven't seen any new spots on my fish. So now, over a month later, I feel confident about adding some new, healthy tank-bred fish to the aquarium. Tank-bred fish tend to adapt better to aquarium life. They readily accept food and are generally speaking hardier than wild-caught fish. Plus, they help reduce pressure on wild populations, making them a more sustainable choice. I bought 5 new fish, and one of them is a bit of a controversial choice, as it can be a hit or miss in a reef tank with corals. Now, all of these fish were tank bred by De Jong Marine Life here in the Netherlands, one of the leading facilities when it comes to sustainable reef keeping. First, I picked up 2 Bengai cardinal fish. We've kept a large group of them before, but after they started getting aggressive towards each other, I had to return some to the store. I was left with 2 pairs, but unfortunately, they didn't make it, or at least I never saw them again. So I really hope these fish do much better. Next, I added a pair of orchid doddybacks. These fish are great for reef tanks. They're hardy, small and reef safe. Now, they can be territorial towards each other, especially with similar sized fish. But in a long tank like mine with plenty of room, introducing them at the same time should help keep aggression down. Now for the controversial choice. Meat Well, actually, I don't have a name for this little guy yet, so drop your name suggestions below. This is a multi-barred angelfish, and the best part of it, it's tank bred. And that's a big deal because these fish are usually wild caught, making them incredibly picky eaters and very difficult to keep alive. In the wild, multi-barred angels feed on sponges and tunicates, which I have both of them in my aquarium. So maybe he'll snack on those, but I'm okay with that. It's just part of nature. Since this one is tank bred, there's a much better chance it will accept prepared foods like pellets, flakes, frozen and live foods. Less stress, better survival rates and easier feeding. These fish can be shy, so plenty of hiding spots are a must, but luckily my tank has plenty of those. Having a captive bred multi-barred angel makes a huge difference in how well it adjusts to the new aquarium. So, what should we name this little guy? And if you have ever kept one yourself, let me know how it went. For now I'm offering a mix of high quality foods, from pellets, flakes, frozen and live foods to macroalgae. There's plenty of that in this aquarium. And that brings us to the next topic of this video. A while ago I added 3 sea urchins to help control an algae problem. And no, not macroalgae, hair algae. In some areas of the reef I noticed thick patches of green hair algae, which I definitely don't want. Sea urchins are fantastic algae eaters and they've cleaned it up so fast. But now they've developed a taste for my macroalgae. While that's not an issue necessarily, since the macroalgae grow so fast in this tank, the problem is that they're ripping apart certain species like this invasive Federcolarpa. Small pieces drift into other parts of the reef and clog up the power heads. So it's time for the sea urchins to move to a new home. They're big chunky guys, don't you think? These sailfin mollies are recovering. Their fins are slowly growing back and thankfully things haven't gotten worse. I'm really relieved that things are looking better in the Saltwater Paludarium, because I was pretty worried during the last video. Last week I also added 3 new corals to the reef, a Lobophilia and 2 brain corals. Before adding them I used Fritz Aquatics Coral Dip, a sponsor of the channel, to ensure they were pest free. We don't want any more unwanted surprises. Under a daylight spectrum, these corals may look a bit plain, but under blue LEDs with an orange filter over the camera, the colors are incredible. The reef is really coming together, but there's a lot more that I want to change and improve. I can't believe it's already been 6 months since we set up this Saltwater Paludarium. When I first embarked on this journey, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or if it would ultimately be a success. The journey was filled with uncertainty and challenges as I navigated the complexities of creating a thriving ecosystem that combined both aquatic and terrestrial elements. In particular, saltwater aquatic elements. Keeping plants in a saltwater environment is typically not recommended, as most plants simply do not tolerate the high salt concentrations. This posed a significant challenge, as I had to carefully select species that could withstand the harsh conditions. Salt creep refers to the tendency of salt to spread and accumulate in areas far from the water source, which can be detrimental to plants and other sensitive organisms. Therefore, even keeping the plants close to the water like this was a delicate balancing act, requiring constant monitoring and maintenance to ensure their health and survival. Despite these obstacles, the experience has been incredibly rewarding. Watching the paludarium come to life with vibrant plants thriving alongside a diverse array of marine life has been a testament to the resilience and adaptability of nature.
Each day brings new discoveries and learning opportunities as I continue to refine my techniques and expand my knowledge of this fascinating world. I am grateful for the journey and look forward to seeing how the Paludarium evolves in the next months and years to come. In this video, we're taking a look at how things are going now and the changes I have made over the past few weeks. If you're new here, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and let's get started. Since the last update, there have been quite a few exciting changes in the aquarium. We've introduced several new fish and animals, and the overall appearance of the tank has improved significantly. The vibrant colors and lively movements of the new additions have truly enhanced the visual appeal. However, today I noticed some damage on the Terrarium coral, which is a bit concerning. We'll need to investigate the cause and take appropriate action to ensure its recovery. I'm not too sure what has happened to it, especially since the other corals seem to be doing really well. Oh well, despite this minor setback, everything else seems to be progressing smoothly. Fortunately, I haven't encountered any issues with ick, the saltwater parasite that was causing problems earlier. This is a big relief. I've been feeding the fish a wide variety of foods, from frozen foods to live foods to pellets and flakes, literally anything I could find. This is very important to keep the fish in the best shape possible. One of the highlights of my aquarium is this cool tank-bred dwarf angelfish we added recently. It's becoming less shy by the day. It's even starting to explore the reef more frequently, venturing out from behind the rocks where it used to hide. This angelfish has a diverse diet, enjoying a variety of foods. It seems to love everything I feed him, and that's great news because usually these fish are very picky eaters, especially the wild-caught version. In the same corner where the dwarf angelfish likes to hide, a pair of Friedmani fish, also known as orchid dottybacks, like to hang out. These fish are a delightful addition to the tank, adding a touch of color and movement. They are constantly darting in and out of the rocks, usually only emerging to eat. Watching them play and hide is quite entertaining. Overall, the aquarium is thriving, and I'm excited to continue observing and caring for these fascinating creatures. And that brings us to the next topic. Many people have suggested adding anemones for my clownfish. Previously, they host my alveopora corals, but I agree that anemones might be the better choice. And look how happy they are now, cozying up inside these two anemones I added. They've also become quite aggressive, both towards other fish and even my hand, indicating they found their permanent home. And to be honest, it wouldn't even surprise me if we start seeing some breeding behavior soon. That would be amazing. The two other additions help maintain balance in this aquarium. The Tomini tank will assist in trimming macroalgae as it grows rapidly, while the two sand-sifting gobies will keep the sand clean. With the selection of macroalgae, I'm confident the Tomini tank will never be hungry. He also enjoys the other foods I provide him as well. But that's not all. We've also added a pair of pajama cardinalfish. They look pretty cool if you ask me, and seem to do great with the other pair of cardinals. Next, let me introduce you to this fascinating creature, a sea cucumber. It's truly a stunning animal. The first 24 hours were quite nerve-wracking as it kept moving around the reef. I was concerned it might get stuck in one of the power heads or settle in a spot where we couldn't really see it. Fortunately, it chose this location and has been sitting here for over 2 weeks now, so I hope it stays there because now we can really see it. This next addition might be one of the most relaxing ones yet. 2 weeks ago I added a pair of banded pipefish. They are fascinating and delicate additions. Relatives of seahorses, these slender fish have elongated tube-like snouts and distinctive red and white bands that help them blend into their surroundings. They are peaceful and shy, often weaving through rock crevices and coral branches in search of tiny prey. Caring for banded pipefish requires a well-established aquarium with plenty of live rock gentle water flow, and peaceful tank mates. They require a diet of live or frozen foods like copepods, baby brine shrimp, and other small crustaceans. I'm making sure I'm providing them with enough supplemental live food to make sure they are in good health. What do you think of these fish? Aren't they awesome? The plants up top are doing really well, growing, and even the orchid is starting to rebloom. This is so exciting and I can't believe this project is doing so well. And to be honest, with this aquarium, I hope I'm able to inspire more people to think out of the box, or should I say, out of the tank. I must admit, I'm not entirely satisfied with the current appearance of the reef. It seems a bit cluttered and lacks the visual appeal I'm aiming for. However, I am quite pleased with the right side of the aquarium, as it closely resembles the overall look I want to achieve throughout the entire setup. Nevertheless, even in this area, I see room for improvements. I'm considering creating some beautiful small zoa and mushroom gardens in various sections of the reef in the near future. I can't wait to see this tank develop over the next 6 months, marking its first year. But we do have to keep in mind that that's not a long time either. It's not even been 1 year yet now, and it already looks like this. In the coming months, I'm also working on the next project, which is going to be even crazier than this one. We're making great progress. A few weeks ago, I noticed some issues with my corals and certain macroalgae. The soft corals were doing great and even the acants were looking healthy, but I couldn't say the same for my Turbinaria and Lobophilia. Something was off. The tissue on these delicate corals started to retreat, exposing the skeleton beneath. But I wasn't sure what was causing it. Corals are sensitive animals, and there are many possibilities for what could be causing this. I didn't see any pests, I didn't see any fish nipping on the tissue of the coral, and I didn't make any changes to the placement of the coral, lighting, or flow strength. I had to test the water to see if that was something that was upsetting them. I did, and my findings weren't great. Some levels were too high, others were too low. This could have been a major factor to these issues I was facing with some of my coral, but it definitely wasn't the only issue. When it comes to the Lobophilia, you can clearly tell it looks starved compared to the other Lobophilia right above it. Compared to this one, the one higher up on the rock looks nice and fat. I have my suspicions as to why this is happening. As part of my cleanup crew, I have this sand sifting goby. One thing I did notice is that it kept spewing sand right next and sometimes even on top of the coral. But every time the coral did manage to clear off the sand off its tissue, but that did keep him from eating properly. Slowly starving to death while spending its remaining energy on clearing off the sand. Anyways, the first issue was an easy fix. I performed a small water change every few days and it slowly fixed the water quality issues. The goal was not to stress the animals in the tank too much by doing a massive water change at once. The best way to get things back on track is to do things slow and steady. And today the parameters are back on track. That's a big relief, but something we need to keep an eye on. I think I'll move the starving Lobophilia to another part of the reef later in this video when we add tons of other cool corals. But now I'd like to show you something very unique. What you're about to see is a partnership like no other. A partnership so unique that it thrives on teamwork and trust. A relationship between two unlikely creatures, the Wheeler's goby and the pistol shrimp. Meet the Wheeler's goby, a clever little fish that spends most of its time keeping an eye out for danger. But even the fastest fish can't avoid every predator lurking in the shadows. But that's where the pistol shrimp comes in. A tiny creature with enormous power. The pistol shrimp has one weapon that outshines the rest, its claw. With a claw that can snap shut so fast, it creates a bubble that stuns prey and predators. Like this snail, it got knocked right over. But it doesn't use this power alone. It has a companion, the goby. Together they share the same home, a burrow. The goby takes up a position at the entrance while carefully scanning the horizon. If a predator gets too close, it either darts inside the burrow with lightning speed or scares away the predator, always keeping watch over its shrimp friend. When danger strikes, the shrimp's sharp claw can make all the difference. But the shrimp can't really see as well as the goby, and that's where their symbiotic bond truly shines. The goby warns the shrimp of any approaching danger, and in return, the shrimp creates a safe haven, a burrow that's too deep for most predators to reach. In a world where survival is often about strength and size, this pair teaches us something profound. It's not always the biggest or the fastest that thrives. Sometimes it's the ones who know how to work together, who find their strengths in each other. And so the Wheeler's goby and pistol shrimp continue their delicate dance of survival. The goby keeps watch and the shrimp builds. Two creatures, different in form but united in purpose, proving that in this world, teamwork is everything. And this is exactly the vision I had for this giant saltwater paludarium, and I'm so happy to see it's taking shape. Tons of small creatures with each their own story, all forming a healthy and thriving ecosystem. It doesn't matter when or where you look, there is always something going on. A lot of people were skeptical when I built this saltwater aquarium and put plants this close to the salt water. And I'll confess, I was skeptical as well. I never managed to keep plants alive for longer than a few weeks, so this was a big challenge. But I'm surprised with how well things are going. Plants are growing and things are maturing very well. One thing I'm very proud of is my orchid. Orchids are some of the most beautiful plants, and I always thought they were incredibly difficult to keep alive. Turns out, they're not. Look at this, it's blooming again. Some people recommended I cut off the old stems when they finished blooming a few months ago, so the plant could direct its nutrients to new growth. This was the best decision I ever made, because look at all these new flowers. It's so exciting to see this plant bloom again. I water my plants with RODI water every few days, and once a month I even add a few drops of aquarium plant fertilizer to that water. But other than that, that's all I'm really doing for these plants. It's so simple. The mangroves are the only plants that are in contact with salt water, and I'd say that even those are doing very well. But there are a few things I'd like to keep an eye on. With the lights on, you don't really notice much. But when I turn off the lights, you can clearly tell this one, for example, turned yellow. There are some other mangroves that are having the same issues. But they all have something in common, which is kind of a relief. Only the mangroves I bought with leaves face these issues. The propagules I bought without any leaves don't have these issues. All of the mangroves have new growth, and it seems that only the old leaves are turning yellow. So I'm not too worried about this. What do you think? Another factor that could influence this rapid change of the plants dropping their old leaves are the messed up water parameters we talked about earlier. Salinity was a little bit too high, and while these mangroves tolerate salt well, swings or elevated levels can stress these plants out. They are true divas. So I think this is a survival instinct where they drop their old leaves to support the new growth. Alrighty, let's add some new corals to these rocks. This time I decided to go for some smaller pieces, but before we add them to the system, let's make sure they don't contain any unwanted pests by dipping them in this coral dip. Big shout out to the channel sponsor Fritz Aquatics. I think it's going to turn out really well if we focus on small corals and not so much on big pieces. Tons of smaller corals make the tank look much larger in perspective compared to only having a handful of big pieces. That's why I decided to go for a few different varieties of zoanthids, mushroom corals, small Euphilia coral frags, and this big gorgonian, and you'll see why and understand why later in this video. After spending about 15 minutes in the coral dip, I inspect them one final time and clean them off in a separate container with salt water I took out of the aquarium. While this product is great, you don't want coral dip inside the tank itself, as that could hurt the ecosystem, killing off the good critters as well. I really struggle with coral placement. It's not just difficult to make things visually appealing, but each type of coral also has different requirements when it comes to flow and lighting. However, mushroom corals and zoanthids are some of the most forgiving corals you can have in your aquarium. They are soft corals. Soft corals are a type of coral that lacks a skeleton beneath its tissue. The only thing they really need are nutrients. Nutrients like nitrates and phosphates. These two elements are the result of waste in the aquarium. So you could say that these corals do great in a dirty aquarium. Just like the mangroves and macroalgae, they all need nutrients. Not too much, but definitely not too little. Mushroom corals and zoanthids come in a ton of different colors, which makes them even more fun. There's something else we need to take into consideration, because not all corals can be placed close to each other. But with these corals, that's not a problem at all. In fact, you can create some really nice colorful gardens with them. The euphyllias require a bit more attention, as they do have a skeleton to support. You'll need to keep an eye on your calcium and magnesium levels, but other than that, they are pretty easy as well. This big piece may look a bit odd, but trust me, it's such a nice addition to this aquarium. This is called a gorgonian. It is a type of filter feeding coral. This yellow one here is also a gorgonian, and it's doing really well. These corals have tons of small polyps that they use to filter small particles from the water as a way of consuming food. Since this aquarium doesn't have any mechanical filtration, there are a lot of small particles floating around in the water column. They're not as visual to our eyes, but trust me, they are a must for these corals. Their cool structure and shape makes them a very cool addition to the system. What do you think of these additions? If you are a regular viewer of these videos, you may have noticed something else by now. If not, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any future updates. Some time ago, when I was dealing with a saltwater parasite called Marinic, I added 2 cleaner reses to help eat these parasites off the fish. But as these fish are constantly trying to clean the other fish in the tank, this can become stressful for the others. I had 2, meaning 2 fish that were constantly trying to nip the other fish. I started noticing some stress-related behavior where these fish were being chased around the aquarium by these cleaner reses non-stop. As some people mentioned earlier as well, this was something to keep an eye on. I decided it was a good idea to relocate them. We no longer have issues with these saltwater parasite. But have you ever tried catching a supersonic fish in a massive aquarium with lots of obstacles? Yeah, this was a massive challenge. Catching these fish with a net is no option. I decided to turn off the lights and wait a few hours because most fish go into hiding to rest during the night. And this turned out to be a great idea because I found one of the cleaner reses inside the barnacles I added when I set up this aquarium. It's the perfect hideout for them. But not in this case. I easily picked up the barnacles and slowly poured the fish into a bucket. I only caught one and I brought it together with the 3 sea urchins I had in this tank to the local fish store. The sea urchins developed a taste for my macroalgae, so they also had to go. Now that I have only 1 cleaner res, I no longer see any issues. The fish aren't constantly getting chased around anymore. Over the next few weeks, I want to work on automating my tank more. Don't get me wrong, it's not a lot of work to maintain this system as some people think. But to keep things more stable, I would like to install an auto top-off system. This system will ensure that the salt levels in the aquarium remain stable, as it will automatically fill the tank back up with RODI water when water inside the aquarium evaporates. Remember, water evaporates, but salt doesn't. As water evaporates, salt levels go up. RODI water is water stripped of its minerals, metals and pollutants and doesn't contain any salt. This is what's used to top off for evaporation in a reef tank. Another thing I'd like to add is an automatic misting system. This will help keep the moss nice and moist. The heat of the lights and the open room really makes the water evaporate so much faster and the moss dries out after 1 or 2 days without misting. A misting system will ensure they are constantly being kept moist and will take a lot of work off my back. Most of the time spent maintaining this system goes into misting these plants. Unfortunately, my filefish isn't eating any of the Aptasia anemones we found on the rocks. And to be honest, I haven't seen it in a few days. This is common. It's constantly hiding behind the rocks or in between the macroalgae here on the right. I keep seeing more and more of these tiny pest anemones, so I think it's time to look for alternatives. There are plenty of natural alternatives, so no need to worry. We don't want this to get out of control, as these anemones can also irritate corals as they get close to it. Just look at how amazing these new corals look. They were a great choice and I can't wait to add more to this reef tank. What do you suggest we add next?
It has been a while since we last checked out the Saltwater Paludarium, and it's hard to believe it's been nearly 300 days since I set it up. So yeah, I figured it's a good time to check back in on it and show you what's been going on. We're working on 2 very exciting projects and I can't wait to show you all the content that's being worked on. Without further ado, let's check out the Saltwater Paludarium and see what has changed. I couldn't believe my eyes when I rewatched the previous episode. So much has changed over the past 2.5 months, it's insane. When you see the aquarium every day, you don't really notice how much something changes. But wow, it's crazy. First of all, just look at how much the aquarium has filled out. The macroalgae has truly transformed this aquarium. Over the past 2.5 months, I've also been able to get my hands on some new macros. I tried to make my collection as big as possible. With so many different kinds of macroalgae available in the world, it's hard to get them all. A friend of mine from Spain recently sent me an amazing package containing a variety of new species that I didn't have before. I got some new macroalgae, some live copepods for the aquarium itself, and Cheeto Grow. His online store called Jelly Farmer is definitely worth checking out, and I'll leave a link in the description of this video. The macroalgae he sent me is truly fascinating. I also received a very cool shipment from outside of the EU recently, but more on that later as it ties right into our next project. I've been dosing this fertilizer called Cheeto Grow for 2 weeks now, and the aquarium is looking much better already. By the way, this is not sponsored, Brightwell isn't a sponsor of my channel, these are my true findings as always. Everything is growing so fast. It is clear that the macros were lacking some essential trace elements. Speaking of trace elements and water parameters in general, in the previous update I mentioned I was having some trouble with some of my corals. I tested some key water parameters and figured some were way off. I managed to fix these imbalances and we were back on the right track, or so I thought. As it turns out, some trace elements were being used faster than they were being replenished by water changes. Mangroves, macroalgae and even some coral use trace elements like potassium and iron. However, when you have this much and it's all growing rapidly, these elements are being consumed at an incredible rate. When we set up this aquarium, we used a base layer of miracle mud. This is a mix of essential elements to support mangrove growth and overall system health. We then topped that off with live sand and I thought we were off to a good start. And to be honest, we kinda were. Just look at how much these plants have grown over the past 300 days. A lot of the mangroves have started branching out, finally. These plants are growing so fast that they now require additional supplements to maintain their beautiful green leaves.
As you can see, some leaves are discolored or dying off entirely. This doesn't look good. However, we can fix these issues by dosing liquid fertilizers and adding root tabs into the substrate. I'll be sending off ICP water tests on a frequent basis now to make sure we find a good balance with this. But not all mangroves are growing as quickly. I noticed that the ones not directly underneath the LEDs aren't really growing at all. It looks like they're slowly pushing out new growth, but it's so slow and we might be better off moving them somewhere else. I recently added some new plants to the plant mountain and moved a few others to other places. I added 2 new orchids, some bromeliads, and it's looking amazing. However, one thing not looking amazing at all is the moss. It dries up so fast since it's not a closed environment. I also haven't been able to install an automatic misting system yet, and let me explain why. We might have to take down part of this setup pretty soon. Yep, you heard that right. Since these mangroves are growing so fast, parts of the underwater world are in the shadows, limiting the space we have for macroalgae and coral. On the left part of the aquarium, I tied the mangroves closer to the wood, keeping them out of the light using fishing line. This helped open up the area underneath a lot, but it's only a temporary fix. We'll probably have to move these lights higher up or mount them differently. Now, since these mangroves are branching out, we can soon start shaping them with bonsai wires and create smaller bush-like trees. This will hopefully help limit these problems. I'm struggling to find a good solution for the lighting and the lack of moisture that is both practical and good looking. So if you have any suggestions, or if you are an engineer, tell me in the comments down below what you think works best here. I really appreciate it. For the time being, I added a makeshift setup to provide additional lighting to the part right underneath these mangroves. Anyways, let's see what else has changed inside the aquarium, because some fish have moved out of here. If you are a regular viewer, you may have noticed that the sand-sifting goby is gone, as well as the Falco's hawkfish. Both were becoming a pain in the rear because of the way they acted. These sand-sifting goby kept dumping sand into the mouths of certain corals, irritating them and over time starving them to death. I managed to catch one of the 2 sand-sifting gobies a while back, but the other one was way too fast, up until recently. I was lucky and managed to catch it. Once out of the aquarium, I dropped it off to the fish store, and that's one problem solved. The Falco's hawkfish is currently in my 6-gallon Reef Casa tank. I'll bring it to the fish store soon. As we knew before, these fish are known for eating small inverts like sexy shrimp, porcelain crabs, and other small snails and shrimp. Well, I had quite a few of all of those in my aquarium, and let me emphasize the word had. And now I know why. This fish managed to snack on a fortune worth of inverts. I even caught it right in the act. What a stupid decision. Oh well, the fish had a feast, and I don't have any inverts left. Just kidding, I know 2 of my porcelain crabs are still alive and live in separate anemones. One lives with the clownfish and the other lives in the tide pool with the sexy shrimp. This Reef Casa tank has transformed into a macroalgae jungle, as I keep adding my cuttings to it when I do maintenance on the big tank. It's incredible to see how much 1 week worth of macroalgae cuttings can look like. And speaking of Reef Casa, I'm working on something incredible. Over the past few weeks we've been working on a new studio or fish room. As of now, I have 2 Reef Casa aquariums waiting in that room, and 2 more are set to arrive next week. This means we'll have 5 different models of the Reef Casa line, and this gives us so much opportunity to create cool ecosystems and videos. Let me know what you would like to see in these tanks, and we might be able to make it happen. You all seem to love the Reef Casa aquariums. I did 4 videos on the 6-gallon a while back, and through the affiliate link I have for these aquariums in the description of my videos, over 20 people were inspired and bought the same aquarium or a different model. That's incredible and makes me feel so good. It helps make this all possible, as I get a small kickback from it at no additional cost to you. In addition to these Reef Casa tanks, we'll also have additional room left. So if you have any cool suggestions in terms of freshwater aquariums or even terrarium ecosystems, there's plenty of opportunity here. Alrighty, let's head back upstairs and check out the second project. This one was announced back in February, but due to some insane delays with the custom aquarium I ordered, it hasn't made any further progress. About 2 weeks ago, they finally delivered the right aquarium, and now we can start building that setup as well. This is going to be so insane. And I really hope you all are ready for a lot of content, because it's about to get serious. In the previous episode, I wasn't happy with the way certain parts of the system looked. Take a look at this part, for example. It's a very steep rock wall and there's not a whole bunch of room in between the rocks and the glass. This limits us in terms of coral placement, and the macroalgae up top created a big shadow. It didn't look good at all. You can check back on the previous episode to see how that looked. It was awful. I trimmed down a lot of that macroalgae and shaped it up so that more light could reach the bottom of the aquarium. I then added some different species of algae in different shapes, colors and sizes. I glued some belly polyps and tube worms to the rock and put some mushrooms on the sand. In my opinion, this is a huge improvement to the system. The foul fish I have in this aquarium blend in perfectly with the Halimeda algae. Sometimes they are so hard to find. But that's what makes this system so special. I have a ton of small gobies in here as well, but as these macroalgae and corals grow, it becomes harder to spot them. If you are a regular viewer, you might remember that I've been dealing with some Aptasia anemones in this tank. They are pets, I mean pests, and foul fish are known to be natural predators. However, mine seem to leave them alone. These fish are tank bred, which is probably why they aren't really eating them. Wild-caught fish have natural instincts, but I've heard from multiple people that they have the same issue that I have. They leave the anemones alone and only eat frozen foods and even dry foods in some cases. There are other natural predators to these anemones like peppermint shrimp and Bergia nudibranchs. I added some very small peppermint shrimp. But let me remind you of my Falco's hawkfish, and then you can probably fill in what happened to these shrimp. Yep, you took a right guess. A friend of mine recently gave me some cool torch corals out of his own setup. His colonies were massive, so he cut off a few heads to put in my tank. They may look boring with this lighting, but with some blue and an orange filter over the lens, the colors are to die for. They look amazing and I'm so thankful for these corals. The problems I was facing with my fish a few months ago seem to have been fixed now. I haven't had an ick outbreak, and part of the reason why is that I've removed stress factors, increased feeding, and provide them with quality foods only. This keeps the fish healthy and their immune systems up, making them less prone to catch diseases or be bugged by parasites. Now this doesn't mean I was starving my fish previously, but just as a balanced diet is super important for us, the same applies to fish as well. They just need a balanced diet with enough vitamins and just good quality food. This Saltwater Paludarium keeps challenging us, and while the aquarium seems to be doing okay and the macroalgae, mangroves and fish seem to be thriving, I keep running into issues with my coral. I can't wrap my head around what's happening. But as I was observing my tank from a distance a while ago, I might have found the root cause of this issue. During the last episode, we went over some issues I was facing with some of my corals and how we were able to fix them. But now we've run into the next problem. You see, at the bottom of this arch we used to have a nice variety of colorful Acanthastraea coral. But now, not much of that is left. About 10 days ago, they all closed up suddenly, seemingly irritated by something. But I highly doubted there was something wrong with my water, as it seemed to be only limited to these acants. The other corals in my aquarium seemed unaffected. Yes, the toadstool coral is closed up now, but this is nothing unusual. We have to remember that these are live animals and they can't extend their polyps on demand or act a certain way. That's just impossible. I think this one closed up because it's due for a slime shed soon. This happens every once in a while with these toadstool leather corals. It's nothing to worry about. Anyways, the other soft corals were looking amazing, but that's not a difficult thing to achieve. These corals are very hardy. However, the torch corals, alveopora, and even the maze brain corals we have in here looked very happy and healthy, so it was super confusing. I still tested my water to make sure nothing was wrong. I tested the major parameters including nitrates, phosphates, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, salinity, and of course not to forget the temperature of the water. Now all of these were in check and pretty much the same as the last time we tested the water, so a major swing in any of these parameters seemed very unlikely. So if it's not the water, then what else could it possibly be? Well, I may have found the answer. As I was laying in my bed, staring at the aquarium, I noticed something. The filefish and my dwarf angel kept swimming up to the acants, and every once in a while, they would nip at the corals. Could this be the issue? Did my fish turn into coral-eating monsters? Now, while these fish are mostly considered reef safe, there's always a risk that they will start eating your coral. But why would they target only this species all of a sudden? I don't see them nipping at other corals yet, but we have to keep a close eye on that. This dwarf angel is considered one of the safer options when it comes to them being reef safe or not. But they can still pick on corals, sponges and other animals. As I've read online, keeping them well fed seems to reduce this risk. So does this mean that it wants more food? I feed the fish a variety of foods, frozen foods, live foods and some pellets and flakes. But maybe I should start adding an extra cube of something to the mix. Feeding these fish will always remain a challenge because a large part of their diet and nature consists of sponges. I have one of them in my tank, but so far it doesn't seem to eat it. Unfortunately, I'd rather have this dwarf angel eat the sponge than my corals. The same goes for the filefish. Both of these species are tank bred. They have never seen the ocean, so why are they eating the coral? Still, just to be sure it's not something related to trace elements that we can test for here, or pollutants like heavy metals, I'm sending out another ICP test. I'll keep you posted once I get the results back. I have to send them to a lab, so it will take a few days, so stay tuned. Someone made a pretty good comment on the last episode and it reads as follows. I don't understand why every single saltwater tank has the exact same fish. If you do a tank like that, why not put some different fish? There are literally thousands of types to choose from, but everyone gets the same Nemo, the pink or yellow marker, whatever that may be, and the other 3 classic ones, whatever those may be. I don't know, no hate, but if you work so hard in getting these rare macroalgae and corals, get some different fish too. And I'm definitely open to that, but unfortunately no examples were given in that comment. Now there were 20 replies to it, and while there were some very good suggestions in there, a lot of options presented to me were impossible in this aquarium. While the aquarium may look big, its volume is only 100 gallons, and when we consider the room, the rocks, sand and other items take up, only 70 gallons of water remains inside the aquarium. In that light, we are pretty limited in terms of our options. So knowing this, what do you recommend? Do you notice a difference in video quality? I just got a new professional camera and I'm so excited to move on from being an absolute amateur. Up until now, I've always used my iPhone to film these videos. It's easy, quick and relatively good quality. But an actual camera allows me to do so much more. One disadvantage of using my iPhone is that I have to be very close to the aquarium to film the animals. I could zoom in, but it would degrade the quality tremendously. And also, by doing that, I would be disturbing the fish. With a macro lens on this new camera, I'm able to sit far away from the aquarium and film the natural behaviors of all these animals. This is so much cooler. Usually when I'm right in front of the aquarium, my grandma fish, for example, doesn't come out of hiding and hangs out behind these barnacles. But when I sit far back, it slowly comes out of hiding every once in a while. Check this out, it's yawning. But it's not the type of yawning we humans do. There are a few reasons to explain this behavior. Territorial display warning other fish to stay away, but sometimes it's not aggression. It could be a jaw stretching behavior or a way of realigning its jaw. similar to how other reef fish do it. In rare cases when the fish yawns constantly, it could indicate gill irritation or parasites. Now this one luckily barely yawns, so it should be healthy and fine. 2 days ago I added a small school of Vanderbilt chromis fish. I think they will be a fantastic non-standard addition to the aquarium. They're still a bit shy, but slowly and surely they're moving to the front more. The macroalgae and mangroves serve as great cover for these fish. It allows them to stay away from the bigger and more active fish, but I wonder if they know that the pistol shrimp and goby are right underneath this rock here. They better be careful. Speaking of macroalgae and mangroves, during the last update we talked about yellowing of some mangrove leaves and the lack of trace elements. Some people mentioned salt shedding, where the mangrove directs excess salt to a certain old leaf to dispose of it. Eventually that leaf will turn yellow and fall off. Others recommended I add some root tabs to the sand. So I went to the store and I bought a bag of these root tabs. They contain all the necessary trace elements to support these mangroves. Now it might be too early to tell, but I think the mangroves really like this. I also started dosing a liquid fertilizer for the macroalgae, and they seem to be thriving now. I even added some new species to the tide pool. Now which one of these is your favorite? Another recent addition are these small tube worms. I saw them at my local fish store and had to get them. They are the perfect miniature animal for this tide pool. Now I'm considering slimming down on my Caulerpa species. They are fast growing and quite invasive, and while I don't mind this or the way it looks, it could be causing a few issues in the aquarium. Caulerpa is known for releasing small amounts of a certain chemical that can obstruct coral growth. This might be a major contributor to the issues we've been facing lately. I slowly want to replace these fast-growing Caulerpa species with less toxic species like Halimeda, Dragon's Breath or other cool macros. What do you think of this idea? I'm also considering making this a more soft coral focused aquarium. It will be much easier considering it's a pretty high nutrient system. Soft corals thrive on higher levels of nitrates and phosphates. And since this aquarium runs on higher nutrient levels to support the macroalgae and mangroves, this could be a perfect option. Think of zoanthids, mushrooms, rare toadstool corals and stuff like that. Colorful, a massive variety in different shapes and all looking very lively. Since the invert-eating Falco's hawkfish has moved out of this aquarium, we can also begin introducing tons of small critters like shrimp and crabs. But does that mean that we won't be seeing any more LPS or SPS corals on this channel? Absolutely not. As we're filling up the aquariums in the new fish room, we'll have plenty of opportunities to try out certain theme-focused aquariums. Think of an SPS-only aquarium, a euphilia tank, or dedicated to some rare animals that can't live together or in the big tank. I'm thinking about cool rainbow mantis shrimp, cuttlefish, jellyfish, or even seahorses. I want to give a massive shout out to March from Fragbox Corals and Reef Casa for supplying us with these awesome aquariums. You should check out his website and get a nano tank yourself. It's so much fun. If you have any other cool ideas for setups or the room in general, let me know. These white walls are pretty boring. These setups can be freshwater, saltwater, and even terrarium related. So taking it back to the Saltwater Paludarium, some changes are ahead, but it will only get better over time. What happened to the Saltwater Paludarium? That's a question I've been asked quite a lot lately, and honestly, I don't blame you. It has been well over 100 days since I last posted an update about the Saltwater Paludarium here on the channel. No updates, no quick clips, nothing. During this time, a lot of you started sending me DMs and leaving comments on other videos, all asking the same thing. What happened? Did I take it down? Did it fail? Or is it still here? Well, let's take a look. The truth is, I simply didn't have much to talk about. The system has been doing really well, and over the past few months, nothing dramatic or unusual happened. It was just stable. And sometimes that doesn't make for the most exciting update. But that stability comes with a cost. Because I can tell you this now, this tank is coming down. As strange as this might sound, it's something that needs to happen. In the last update about 3 months ago, I talked about a dilemma I was facing. As the mangroves continued to grow, they slowly started running out of space. They were getting closer and closer to the lights, which actually caused darker areas in the water below. And in some cases, even burned leaves on the mangroves themselves. So I ask you a question. Do we trim the mangroves back and buy ourselves a little bit more time? Or do we completely rework this system, move the mangroves towards the center of the aquarium, and give them the space they need to grow into a full, bushy mangrove forest? After reading through your comments and considering my own slight preference, the answer became pretty clear. The system needs to calm down. Now, that doesn't mean it's happening right away. There are a few other projects that need to move forward first. Projects I announced over a year ago, like the terrarium build and the new fish room with nanotanks downstairs. All of these projects are connected, and one of them directly affects what happens to this tank next. You know, sometimes life just gets in the way, and when you try doing too many things at once, motivation can quickly fade, which is what happened here. But this week I finally began building the terrarium, a tropical terrarium. A 6-foot wide DIY project tucked into the bulkhead of the attic. Now it is still early, but it's slowly starting to take shape. What really pushed me to start were plants, live plants. I just kept on buying new plants, and at a certain point the pressure was on. If I didn't build the environment for them, I was going to start losing them. Which brings us back to the Saltwater Paludarium. Because while it may look calm on the surface, quite a few interesting things have been happening over the past few months. Let's take a closer look. I recently added a new coral to this system. It's a slipper coral, part of the plate coral family, and it's honestly massive. I came across it while browsing a store's website and it immediately stood out. I had never seen one before in person, and they only had a handful available. It also seemed like they were selling out pretty quickly, so it wasn't one of those corals where you just overthink it for a long time and hopefully get it. Now, to make it work, I had to move my bubble coral to a different spot in the aquarium. As you may know, my filefish and dwarf angelfish have developed a bit of a taste for certain LPS corals. Now, with this in mind, I had to keep a close eye on this one from the start. What I find very interesting is how selective these fish are, because they'll completely ignore some LPS corals while repeatedly going after others. This one, for example, has been left alone for all this time it's been in here, as well as the bubble coral. They are perfectly fine. The Ophelia corals, on the other hand, were a different story. I noticed some early signs of tissue recession. I'm not sure if it was because of the fish nipping it or some other reasons, but just to make sure, I decided to move them before things could get worse. The slipper coral has now been in the system for about 2 weeks, and so far I haven't noticed any irritation or stress from nipping. Hopefully it stays that way. Speaking of fish, some of you were wondering how they're doing overall, especially when it comes to ick. The good news is I haven't seen any signs of it in a very long time. And while I'm sure that the parasites never fully disappear, the difference now is the environment. Feeding quality fish foods, stability and low stress make all the difference. I haven't used any medications. The fish look healthy and they're active, and because of that, any ick parasites that might be present simply cannot get the upper hand. Now, there is some territorial behavior, but it's minor and expected. It doesn't really make a difference, and it doesn't seem to be causing any stress. Overall, the tank is doing really well. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about macroalgae. Over the past few months, there's been a huge surge in demand for it. And honestly, I understand why. It's probably because of the same reason I fell in love with it. Macroalgae has become a very cool, easy and affordable alternative for people who want a natural looking saltwater display. I've been getting inquiries not just from people nearby, but also from people and even stores abroad, asking where to get certain species or just buy them from this aquarium. At the moment, I have a small holding tank with Halimania stipitata cuttings. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Now, these will be shipped out very soon, and when I really think about it, I've probably made over 50 people happy with macros over the past few months alone. It really makes me happy seeing people enjoy this amazing hobby. Despite shipping out so much, I still have a ton left. It just keeps growing and growing like crazy. I also received a new species to add to my collection. This blue one. I'm not entirely sure what the exact name is off the top of my head, but I'll leave a link in the description to a place where you can simply order some. Unfortunately, it was freezing quite a bit during the shipping process, and when it arrived here it wasn't in the best condition. Most of it didn't make it, but some sections survived, so for now, it's a bit of a waiting game. This species is very sensitive to temperature changes, and the store already offered to send more once temperatures go up a little bit. So fingers crossed it recovers. Above the waterline we have the terrestrial plants, and they are doing fantastic as well. Nothing to complain here. The asparagus fern in particular has been growing incredibly fast. It's already stretching towards the middle of the aquarium. The turtle plant is another favorite of mine. It has now almost reached the ceiling, and it's such a unique plant to watch develop. What's especially interesting is how its leaves react to light. The leaves higher up stay green, while the ones closer to the light slowly turn red. That color change is actually a natural defensive mechanism. When exposed to intense light, the plants produce red pigments, which kind of acts like sunscreen for the plant. They help protect the tissue from light stress while still allowing photosynthesis to happen. Overall, the aquarium is doing great, but I also think it has so much more potential once we redo it. I'd love to expand the tide pool area, because that's still one of my favorite parts of this entire build. There are also some things I'd like to improve on, like flow, heat distribution, and maybe even add some more dynamic features. Things like actual tidal movement or an automated rain system. There are a lot of ideas that come to mind almost instantly, but this is definitely something we'll be taking on step by step. One of the most asked questions I get about my saltwater paludarium is simple. How do you actually maintain it? A lot of people seem to assume that something like this must be a full-time job, that I'm constantly trimming plants, testing water, or doing maintenance every single day just to keep it alive. After all, we're dealing with salt water and live plants in the same system, which sounds like a recipe for endless work. But what if I told you that most of the time I actually don't touch the tank at all? In fact, what you're looking at right now is a system that hasn't had proper maintenance for an entire month. The reason for that is that this tank manages to balance itself out naturally. The macroalgae and mangroves play a huge role in that process. Fish constantly release nutrients into the system through waste, and those nutrients, mainly nitrates and phosphates, become food for the plants and algae. As they grow, they absorb those nutrients and release oxygen back into the water and the surrounding air. In other words, the tank is constantly recycling its own waste. And it's not just the plants doing the work. The cleanup crew helps a lot as well. As part of the cleanup crew, I have a sand-sifting sea cucumber and a group of starfish. They help keep the sand bed turned over and clean, while even a tiny hermit crab in there patrols the rocks picking away at some bits of algae. So when I leave the system alone for a while, it usually stays pretty balanced on its own. The only thing I do like to do once a week or so is to clean the glass with a magnet cleaner. Super simple and it takes less than 5 minutes. But after a month without doing proper maintenance, things do start to get a little out of control visually. Some species of macroalgae have grown too large and have started to break apart and spread, like this one right here. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a natural way for these algae to reproduce and colonize new areas. Because this piece got caught behind these mangrove roots, it will probably establish a whole new patch over there. You see similar things happening with species like Halimeda, which grow tall and dense. Eventually they block light from reaching the lower parts of the algae, causing sections to break off and spread around the tank. It's actually a really fascinating natural process. The tide pool is completely overgrown with Caulerpa, a very fast growing kind of macroalgae. Let's be honest, it also does make the tank look a little bit messy, and I'm not a huge fan of that look. So today it's time to step in and bring this paludarium back into visual shape. We'll be doing a proper maintenance session. Let's call it my monthly routine. One of the first things I want to take care of today are the plants up top. The ones that are growing above the waterline. These plants are not actually in contact with the salt water at all, unlike some people think. In fact, if they did touch the salt water, they would quickly start to die. That's actually something I suspect might already be happening with the moss and possibly even this orchid over here. Salt water and most terrestrial plants simply don't mix. Despite that, the plant growth up here has been absolutely insane lately. Take this begonia for example. It's just a single plant in a very small pot, but somehow it has managed to start growing in two completely different directions. One side is stretching out towards the front of the aquarium, while the other side is reaching straight upward. Recently it even started growing above the light fixture itself. I'm honestly curious to see how tall this thing can actually get. Another plant that has been doing incredibly well is the asparagus fern. For months it was growing pretty slowly, just becoming denser and fuller over time. But then suddenly I noticed this one shoot growing straight upward. Within just a week it shot right past the height of the ceiling light. This fern is absolutely crazy. There are a few small dead pieces inside the plant that I'm going to remove. Sometimes tiny bits from this plant, those little needle-like leaves, fall down into the water. But from what I've seen, that doesn't really cause any issues for the aquarium. Now right behind the asparagus fern, there's also this beautiful watermelon Dischidia. It has grown all the way around the plant mountain, climbed up the wall and even reached the ceiling. And it's even starting to produce these tiny little flowers, which is really cool to see. The other cool thing about this plant is that it keeps reaching for light throughout the entire day. It just swings around constantly. At one point during the day it's attached to the wall and the next it's just dangling in front of it. I've also been dealing with some mealy bugs on the mangroves. I've had them since the very beginning and every time I see one I tip it with a cotton swab and some rubbing alcohol. They leave this waxy-like substance on the leaves, which is pretty annoying and looks gross. Anyway, now that we've tidied up the plant section, it's time to water them. Some viewers think this is a complicated process, but honestly it's quite simple. I recently bought this high-pressure sprayer that I fill with RODI water, the same purified water I use to top off the aquarium when water evaporates. I spray down the moss and all the plants to keep them hydrated, and about once a month or so I also add a few drops of aquarium plant fertilizer into the sprayer. It's a really simple system, but it seems to work really well. The mangroves are doing really well. Many of them are starting to branch out, and the ones in the middle of the tank are getting really tall now. About a month ago, during my last maintenance session, I added some root taps into the substrate around the roots. I started noticing a few leaves turning yellow, which is usually a pretty clear sign that the plants are missing something. And honestly, it did make sense because it had been a few months since I last added root taps to the system. Given the incredible growth, it was very likely that they were missing some trace elements. It had been a few months since I last added any root taps to the system. Mangroves grow slowly, but they still need access to minerals in the substrate to stay healthy. These root taps slowly release those nutrients into the sand, making them available for the roots to absorb over time. After adding them, the plants seemed to respond really well. A few mangroves did still drop a few leaves afterward, but that can happen for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it's just part of their normal growth cycle, and sometimes it's a delayed reaction to a temporary nutrient deficiency. Either way, the new growth looks healthy, and that is a really good sign. So overall, the mangroves seem to be back on the right track. Now that we've taken care of everything above the waterline, it's time to move down into the underwater world of the Saltwater Paludarium. And down there, there's quite a bit of work waiting for us. The first thing I'd like to do is cut back on some of these macros. They've really grown out of control. The tide pool has become pretty much stagnant as flow gets blocked by the tons of macroalgae around it. While we're working on this, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of this channel, the Lua. You might have heard about them on this channel or from other aquarium creators. They are the ones that send me these amazing Illumagic lights, but they're known for a lot more than just that. They sell a ton of products for both saltwater and freshwater aquariums. They sell rocks, substrates, supplements, a full line of equipment from skimmers to wave makers, and these amazing lights. And besides that, you can also get your maintenance equipment from them and a lot more. They ship worldwide and offer free shipping on orders over $49 in the United States. If you click the link in my video description and decide to purchase from them, I get a small kickback at no extra cost to you. It's a win-win. You get some amazing products, and by doing that, you help support the channel. Alrighty, now that I have a bucket full of great looking macroalgae, I don't just throw it in the bin. That's a waste. Depending on the species of macroalgae, I usually drop them off at my local fish store or sell or trade them with local reefers. Unfortunately, the anemone I had on this rock decided to walk around the reef a few weeks ago, and it ended up right where I can't see it properly, which is kind of annoying. But I don't really want to move it back because it obviously wasn't happy in that place anymore. I'm also not really sure what I want to add on this empty rock. Maybe I'll add some corals or macros. What do you think? The plan is to take down this tank later this year and rebuild it, so I might just leave it. Despite not doing any maintenance recently, the sand still looks pretty clean. But I do like to give it a quick stir. I guess that's my secret for keeping white sand. Earlier today I prepared a container of 25 liters of salt water, which I heat up to the exact same temperature as my aquarium. Now I do not test my water, so I have no idea what my current parameters are. But I do like to change a bit of water every now and then to replenish certain trace elements. Even though I don't have a ton of corals that require daily dosing of supplements, the mangroves and macroalgae also consume quite a bit of trace elements. That's just facts. So by changing out a little bit of water, I take out some of the waste and replenish the reef with trace elements. After changing the water, I quickly wipe down the outside of the tank, making sure the water spills are off the glass and the view into the aquarium is crystal clear. No one likes seeing salt stains on your glass, right? Now it's time to give the fish a little food. Every time I work on the system, I'm sure I cause a little stress on them, but I'm pretty sure that they love having a nice meal afterwards. And honestly, that's all it takes to maintain this saltwater paludarium. It really is that simple.